Today is November 21st, 2019. We are beginning this morning's work session. If we could start by standing for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'm just going to start off the meeting with my continuing announcement that the bow hunting program has commenced at EPCAL and town-owned property on Sound Avenue and Middle Road. Bow hunting shall run until Sunday, December 22nd at EPCAL, December 22nd. At EPCAL, members of the public are advised to stay on the walking path at all times, including keeping their animals on the path. Please do not enter the woods where active deer hunting is taking place. Also, just a reminder that this Monday at 6 o'clock here in Town Hall, Mark Lowry will be here. He will be discussing climate smart communities and a few other items. I will have a few more to add to that announcement when I get some more information from my office. And we can begin. If we could have Jeff Murphy, where is he? We're going to do Nextera Solar EAF. So Jeff, do you and Greg want to come up? We also have folks from Nextera here. I think let's just start with our staff first, and then we will call you up to be part of the discussion.
I don't know where Greg went.
Thank you. So just to follow up on the second announcement, Mark Lowry of the Department of Environmental Conservation on will be here to talk about climate smart communities and how we as a community can reach these goals as they pertain to flooding in our downtown, erosion of our beaches, use of open space, and there will be a question and answer period following the presentation, and all are welcome to attend. Again, that is this Monday here at Town Hall.
6 o'clock?
6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. Felt like I announced that 5 times.
And Greg Bergman is now here.
Okay. All right, so we will move on to the Nextera Solar EAF. We had the special board meeting, was it just last week? Last Wednesday on this, and there were some questions as to what information the board had at that time to be able to discuss this. We have not had a full discussion on it as a board, so we have, if we could just go through a few of the items first, just to do some housekeeping, and then we can do the staff report review. So I just wanted to check with all the board because I know there was some confusion. Does everybody have the project narrative with the appendices?
I have the project narrative. I don't have the appendices.
Okay, the appendices are now posted online. There's a copy of the document that's submitted with the original application in September of last year.
Which was emailed to us yesterday, correct?
No, it did not have the appendices to
The
it.
appendices are now posted on the website.
So they were just posted
Yeah,
this morning?
I just have the project narrative.
So do we have a copy of those for the board?
We do not have this is the document that is in question.
Correct.
So
Right.
we do not have hard copies for you. We can certainly get hard copies if you want them. We have it electronically, so we can email you. They're also available on the town website.
But I'm just saying, the board has not had a chance to review the appendices, because you just put them on the website this morning?
The appendices have been in the town clerk since September of last year.
Okay, but they have not been on the website till this morning,
That is
correct?
correct.
Is that
Okay.
a copy of the appendices in your folder right there, Laura?
I have a copy of the appendices, because I requested it from Jeff, and he gave it to me, and I asked that it was posted online, and it was only posted online with the appendices this morning.
Okay, but you had that Wednesday night, right?
Correct. I had it Wednesday
How long
night.
have you had that?
I've had it since the end of October when I requested it, when we had the original meeting, and I had asked for that, and the EAF with the draft EAF, that's part 2, that was never done, and that was delivered to me at the October 31st by Jeff with this.
Well, that would have been helpful to,
Well, you could have
Have
asked
you-
for it.
Well, it's not up to me, it's up to the planning department to get it available for the town board. I have asked since last week to get it to the town board, and it was only put up on the website today. It's not my job to photocopy stuff from planning department.
but
I
the
did
clerk
go
has
into,
had it
I
since
did go
September of
into
last year.
town clerk and try to get it.
Correct, and the planning department is the one who gave it to the clerk last year. So for the town board to have the information, it's the planning board's job to get us the appropriate information to be able to sit up here and make a decision. I don't photocopy stuff from the planning department for the town board to see.
No, but the clerk usually forwards information to
No, the
us.
clerk usually doesn't forward the full package, but that, regardless of what the practice is, it's up to the planning department to make sure that the information that is necessary is in the hands of the people that need to have the conversation about it. So, okay, so the appendices, nobody has at this particular time. You guys don't have it now, or you?
No, I
Okay.
did try to get it, but I only have the narrative.
John, could you just ask if Diane can maybe copy that stuff off to give to the town board?
Sure, the three of you need it, I guess, Catherine, Kim, and Jody?
Yes, I don't think anybody has it.
And Jim, I would imagine.
Yeah, probably.
I think Jim's coming.
Okay, and then the EAF for part 1, 2, and 3, does the town board have all of that?
Yes, the full EAF was posted on the website at the request of the town board after last week's special meeting.
Is-
A request was sent to IT on November 15th of last week, and it was posted at such time. So
Was-
that document has been publicly available.
And 2 and 3 is up on
Part
the,
2 and 3,
on the.
Part 2 and 3 is what was requested, Part 2 and 3 is what was provided.
Okay.
All right, I saw them.
And then just last night, we had also asked for the comments. When we requested lead agency, other agencies sent comments back to the town. We had requested that those be available to, the town board members, which should have been emailed to you, sometime yesterday afternoon. So does everybody have those?
Correct, and we are
Do you
prepared
have
to
a copy
discuss
of
that.
those, Jody?
And they're included in Greg's staff report,
Yes.
correct?
Okay.
Yeah, I have that. I was like,
Well, I'm just making sure everybody has it, because a lot of it just came
no, I
through
have
yesterday
it,
to
but
make
it
sure that
was-
everybody has
yeah,
copies.
because I got it, yes, it was a struggle to get through it all. It wasn't enough time. I stayed up till midnight and got up at 5.
Is there any other information that the board was requesting prior to sitting for this discussion that you may or may not have?
I don't have the comments from the planning board.
Did they provide written comments?
They did not provide written comments, no.
Okay.
I
They-
There was a conversation that was had when the lead agency question was originally raised of whether the town board or the planning board was gonna request lead agency, but they did not provide.
They didn't provide any written comments for it?
Correct.
Okay. And have you guys had a discussion with them since then? Have they given you any verbal comments on this project?
Not as of this date.
The applicant was discussed at a planning board work session, at which time the planning board did have specific questions for the applicant. At this time, being that secret is not completed, we have not been back for another planning board work session for the applicant to address those issues.
Do you know were the questions pertaining to secret, or were they pertaining to the actual?
Questions, there were some questions regarding the PSEG substation build-out. That was really the most significant question.
Okay. All right, so now then, Greg, do you wanna go on, or Jeff, will you be presenting to go on to the memo that you sent for?
So I
Okay,
think,
before you go on, one of the things, at the November 13th meeting, and I gave you a copy of that yesterday, I sent all of you a memo, with a list of the questions that were raised at the meetings.
Yeah.
I deleted any superfluous comments that were not seeker related, so all of you have that?
Yes.
Does
I have that.
everybody have a copy of
Yes.
that?
Correct.
Okay, so we can begin?
Yep.
Okay, okay, thank you.
so if you'd like, so I will kind of, if you want, I could detail the timeframes of this, or we can dig right into the memo. The memo that I prepared addressed comments from my April 10th, 2019 staff report, which was discussed at the only public work session that this application has been aired at, which was discussed on May 9th, 2019. So I did go through a list of the revisions that the applicant has made, things that they've done to address concerns that were raised in my staff report. If you'd like, I can go through those comments.
Okay, and I just for clarity, I think one of the questions that did come up at the other meeting, was there ever a public hearing on this project for
No,
anything? And I
and-
believe that
correct.
there has not been, is that correct?
And I did misspeak, and I do
That's fine.
apologize.
No
I
problem.
was sort of, didn't have much preparation time, didn't have my notes here, but no.
Totally
There has
understandable.
been no public hearing on this application. This application has only been presented in the public sphere once at the May 9th, 2019 Town Board Work Session.
Just a point of clarification on the public hearing. A public hearing is clearly required per town law and town code for the special permit application. There's nothing in secret that requires a public hearing. There's nothing required for public hearings in any secret process. It requires public information and transparency. But even when an application is POS-DEC and requires an environmental impact statement, a public hearing is not required. A public scoping session is required. That is not a hearing. It doesn't have to be before an elected body. It doesn't have to be published and noticed as a public hearing would. It does not carry those legal requirements. It's a public scoping session. But just for clarity's sake, there's no public hearing required as part of secret.
But Jeff, even if it's not required, we could have it.
You can have
I
a
mean,
public.
we should have an opportunity
You can have a
for the
public,
public
you
to
can have
weigh in.
information session, yes. And you certainly had one on November 13th.
Well, that,
I think the community should have advance notice for something like that, so they can come prepared with their questions.
but November 13th wasn't a public information center. It was a special meeting to review a resolution. So it was not a public information center, so there is a little bit of a difference.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, great.
We're ready.
So, you want me to go through some of these bullet points?
I would, yes.
I would,
How many,
yeah.
how many,
John?
just out of curiosity, how many projects have come to the town board as lead agency for, negative declaration or positive declaration in the last 2 years? And how many have gone through this extensive review? I mean, we hire environmental planners that tell the town board, this is what we think you should do. That's what Jeff Seaman did, that's what our new environmental planner does. Jeff, you've had experience in secret reviews, and, I mean, just like the water district just came to me and said, you know what, we've had fines from the DEC that we've paid, you know, we have issues, and, you know, we depend on H2M to advise us as to what those issues are and how to make those issues better. And I don't say, let me see all the test sample results, let me see why you think we should do this, let me see, I mean, we pay people good money that are experts in this field to give us information as to what they think the best recommendation is going forward. And I really just, I don't know if anybody else agrees with me, but I'm just curious as to, in the last 2 years, how many applications have we had where we're actually, you know, looking at the letters from Ag and Markets and going to the websites of Ag and Markets and seeing what their recommendations are, or whether or not we're depending on the environmental experts that we hire to review these secret applications to give us the information and to tell us what approach we should be taking.
Well,
I just like
Are
to
you
comment.
suggesting that we don't allow the public to comment?
No, the public
seems
will
like it.
comment. No, the public will comment. What I'm saying is that there's a lot of information that's given to the town, to the planning department, to the water district, to the sewer district, and we have experts in the field that look at that information that we pay a lot of money to. And as a, you know, council person, not having the expertise in these environmental issues, you know, I understand that the information should be on the website, and the appendices should be on the website for all the applications, so that when we do have a, you know, special permit hearing, that people can come and the information is available to them to question, and that we have those answers for them, which I thought that, Greg, you did a great job the other night in trying to, you know, thumb through your file to answer and address the questions that were being asked of you, and I'm glad for this thorough report today, addressing all of those questions, and I thank you for that.
I appreciate that.
I just,
Well, Greg got put on the spot because we had not had a forum, for the
Right,
public and
and
such to ask
when-
questions, and
right.
that's why it's so necessary, and with a project of this magnitude, I mean, yes, we have experts, but as elected
Understood, but
officials,
there were
I'm
two
still
sep-
talking, but as elected officials, it's our job to ask hard questions and to give the public an opportunity to weigh in and ask their questions.
Understood, and I appreciate the fact that you have had a couple meetings. I think you had one in September 4th with the supervisor in her office, and one on October 4th in the supervisor's office, and I appreciate
what,
that.
Jody?
But I think, well, he said that he came in and discussed
Oh,
these
okay,
things
okay,
with you,
okay.
and it was never shared with the board, and I think that that should have been in a timely fashion. I don't think that these discussions should be happening in the supervisor's office when it comes to SECR. I think that if you want a full transparency of what is happening and what is in an application, these meetings should never occur in the supervisor's office. They
Well,
should
Jody, you
always
just
occur
said- you just-
in, on camera, in front
Jody,
of the public,
you're
which is
just
what we're
saying-
doing
Let me
today.
take this.
Let me
Let me
finish.
take this.
Full transparency, what we're doing here today, instead of delaying developers, which is the amendment to the secret process, which was supposed to speed up the process, and having private meetings and not sharing with the board the discussions that are being had in a public session is not fair to the applicant, and it's not fair to the town, and it's not fair to the process or the public.
Listen, this is not the forum for you to make things political and attack as you
It's
so
not
often
political.
do. Let's move forward together. This is a big project. This is not Laura trying to have secret meetings. This was Laura doing her due diligence, which we all need to do too, and let's move forward and do it
Yeah, but
now.
going
And
forward-
stop with the political attacks. This keeps the board from getting work done, Jody.
You're making it
Let's move
political,
on,
Catherine.
okay? Let's
What
move
I'm
on.
saying is, going forward, I
not
would like
gonna-
these meetings discussed in a public work session and a public forum.
I agree, and that's exactly what we're doing. In the first instance, you were saying that we shouldn't be discussing it, and then you're going on to say that we should be discussing. Let me finish, okay? And you're saying that, you know, I'm trying to make sure that everybody had this information. You're the one who called the meeting on November 13th to move this forward as a negative declaration. During that process, there is a process for secret, and Jeff and Greg will attest to the information that is provided to the town as part of the process to come to a secret determination. It is important, as the legislative body that's going to decide what the secret determination on this, for us to be able to have that information. And I'm gonna say, as far as special permits you're asking, I think we had more discussion about the special permit for a parking lot for a church over in Wading River, and for a small addition to one home, for an office building over in Aquabog, than we have had on this project. So this is a bit of an issue that it should be discussed in a much more comprehensive way.
And going forward, I hope that will happen.
And everybody's here, let's
Yeah.
move on from the petty,
Yeah.
silly
Yes,
stuff and get
thank
the
you.
job done.
All right, so, to
Sorry,
follow up
guys.
on
Yeah.
my April 10th, 2019 staff report, I'm gonna go through a number
Okay,
of
great.
concerns that were raised in my report, to which the applicant did provide revised plans and addressed. So just to clarify, the town board approved resolution 19-425, which authorized the planning department to circulate a request for the town board to request lead agency for the secret review. Letter was circulated to involved agencies. To date, there has been no objection from any involved agency to the town board's lead agency assertion. Copies of their responses and comments have been attached as an addendum to my memo. In a revised set of drawings dated August 9th, 2019, the applicant has provided an underground utility profile underneath Edwards Avenue in order to identify any potential underground utility conflicts for the proposed Gentile line.
Okay, the town board has not seen that yet.
To-
You have it today?
I have it, all the information is contained within this site plan. If you'd like, I can get you copies of this.
But I'm just saying, I just wanna point out that the board has not seen that
Correct.
change yet. Okay.
This application has only been discussed once with the town board in a public forum.
I just wanted to, you know, it did come before, Jody brought it up for a special meeting, there was a change to the site plan that could have effect on other things going on, and we hadn't seen that prior to the November 13th meeting.
Correct.
Okay,
But it is submitted with the original application.
but no, there was a
They
change.
revised, yes.
It was
Well,
revised.
Revised plans.
These plans were submitted on August 27th, 2019. They have been under review by the planning department. They have been in our possession since August 27th,
Okay,
2019.
fair, I just wanna be clear on that.
So your recommendation to the town board to declare this project a negative declaration under SECR took into consideration the road profile and the tie-in under the road, because that information was submitted to you prior to that.
Correct. Our recommendation for now,
Ju-
just to be clear, the
Yeah.
planning department does not make the secret determination.
Correct.
That is that is the decision of the legislative body, this case lead agency being the town board. Our recommendations for the secret neg deck have been based on the full environmental assessment report, the revised site plan drawings, its expanded project narrative and all the environmental information and review that has been provided by the applicant, which was modeled after the S-Power 1 positive declaration and environmental impact statement. I do commend the applicant in coming in and doing their homework and doing their diligence. They did review it. It is worth noting that there was a comment at the November 13th special town board meeting where, I don't remember who said it, but they said something to the effect that the board cannot use prior information from prior applications in making its secret determination. That is not the case. We have been analyzing this specific set of information, these specific set of plans, and all the environmental information that has been submitted. In the secret handbook, it does say that, in addition, the lead agency is encouraged to review its files on previous significance determinations involving similar projects or geographic locations. So not that we are using the information directly from that application, but we have gained institutional knowledge in our review of solar projects.
And it works conversely also, so whatever issues were raised, in the previous project, right? If there was,
Correct.
there was concerns, that those concerns also need to be addressed in this project.
And
Correct?
it's also worth noting that in the entire secret process for the S-Power 1 solar project, which was 20 megawatts, between the initial review and then there was a supplemental EIS which was required, took about 18 months from start to finish.
Without the supplemental, how long did it take?
Probably about a year. The supplemental added about 6 months to it.
Okay, so it,
In that entire 18-month period, the scope of the project did not change. There was the S-Power 1 EIS was absolutely a learning experience. We did gain institutional knowledge. There was relevant information that was provided from PSEG as to the projected build-out and the projected electrical needs of Long Island. Again, not that I'm quoting it or analyzing it or applying it to this, but in that full EIS, using PSEG's modeling forecasts, they didn't forecast the need for additional electrical infrastructure or generation capacity until the year 2035. The solar projects are done to offset the need for traditional fossil fuel-based electrical generation applications. The main component, really the one significant aspect of the S-Power 1 application that was addressed was that the planning board as well as the town board limited the amount of electricity which could be transmitted through the underground Gentile line. That was identified as a potential growth-inducing impact, which is understandable, and actually subsequently S-Power had attempted through their Article 10 process to feed additional electrical lines through this. So gaining that institutional knowledge, that was going to be a recommendation of special permit and site plan approval that the proposed Gentile line underneath Edwards Avenue was going to be restricted to 22.9 megawatts, which is what's proposed by this current project.
okay.
And it also, the S-Power 1 was the glare study, because we were all concerned about the use of the runways and whether or not a glare effect would occur on those runways and be hazardous to anybody that was flying a plane in or out.
Correct.
So, that is institutional knowledge, and it's not something that needs to be restudied. I mean, it was determined in East Hampton, when the solar panels were built right next to the airport, that the glaring wouldn't have an effect on the pilots. But
Correct.
we wanted that included in the original EIS from S-Power 1.
Correct. And the applicant did provide that information in their initial submission. Based on my staff report and comments, I did note that their glare analysis in the initial submission did not take into account the air traffic control tower at the EPCAL runway. I recommend.
In solar one or this one?
For
Is this one? Yeah.
yes, I'm, this now
Yeah.
is for NextEra. Their initial glare review did not account for the impacts to potential occupants of the air control tower at the EPCAL runway. They have since revised their glare study. They did analyze that tower and they did not find any glare impacts. And it's noted that although FAA approval is not required for this particular project, the study demonstrates that the project would comply with FAA regulations if it were so required.
And my other question is, and I know I'm getting off the track here, so I can ask it later, but does it also take into account the cumulative glare impact of all of the solar projects, including S2?
And is that required under SECRA?
There is a cumulative analysis that is required. Independently, neither one of them contributed to a glare analysis. It would be reasonable to assume that if there are two impacts that are analyzing the same, if there's two analyses that are analyzing the same impact and both are shown to have no impact, that combined they would both have no impact. that would be a reasonable assumption under the board, which.
But that's
if the
something we
bo-
could
if-
ask
if
the
if
applicant
bo- If the
to
board would
address,
like
correct?
further clarification, yes, the board can ask
Yes,
that.
okay.
Um, so getting back to, I'll continue on. So in the revised set of site plan drawings, again dated August 9th, the New York State, the site plan application in the packet does identify New York State DEC as well as Town of Riverhead regulated wetlands on the subject parcel or in the vicinity of the proposed construction. The plans demonstrate that the disturbance is fully outside of the 100-foot New York State DEC regulated wetland areas, and as such, would not require a DEC permit for freshwater wetlands. There is some disturbance, however, proposed within 150 feet of some of these regulated wetlands, and as such, will require a recommendation of approval from the Town of Riverhead Conservation Advisory Council. To date, the applicant has submitted a CAC application, and the CAC will review the application at its upcoming meeting. It is noted that the majority of the disturbance within the 150-foot buffers consists largely of the installation of security fencing and trenching activities for the installation of an underground gen-tie line.
But no solar panels.
No solar panels, correct. There are two small man-made ponds along the eastern side of the golf course parcel, the eastern parcel, Long Island Sports Park, whatever you'd like to call it.
Some
which-
of my golf holes are in that water.
Correct. If you want, we can get them back. The applicant is proposing to drain the man-made ponds, dispose of any equipment, mulch and/or liner material, and fill it with on-site clean material. While the CAC will review the application and provide comments, at this time, staff is recommending that the applicant coordinate with the planning department during this process, if approved, to ensure that any wildlife such as frogs or turtles, which may be located in these man-made ponds, are relocated to other wetlands on the subject property prior to them being filled in.
Are those man-made ponds on the town wetlands inventory?
Which
They
is,
are.
which is why they will require the CAC.
And they're also on the state, or no?
No.
Okay.
Per staff comments, the applicant has moved the location of an underground gen-tie line, which was located on the eastern parcel. There was an existing swath of trees to the northwest of the existing clubhouse, which the gen-tie line was gonna go through. The applicant has revised those plans, revised the location of the gen-tie line in order to save this swath of existing trees. The application still would require the removal of approximately a dozen trees, which are located on the eastern portion of the Long Island Sports Park parcel.
Can you just address, I know at one of the comments at the meeting that there was 1,000 trees being,
I don't know where that comment came from. Site plan drawings clearly indicate the existing wooded areas. Site plan clearly indicates that those existing wooded areas are to be retained, so, in as much as that, I have no idea where that 1,000 tree comment came from.
so in the whole plan itself is about a dozen trees?
Perhaps. No, I mean, I will recommend as a condition of special permit and site plan approval that the applicant specifically identify any trees that would need to be removed, as well as install construction fencing around existing vegetative areas to ensure that those trees are not damaged or removed during construction inadvertently. There was an issue raised in my staff report about an existing dilapidated residence on the western parcel,
Do
which
you
is,
have the picture of the whole parcel itself?
that is in my staff report. I didn't include
Is it the April staff report?
Yes.
I think we have, I think that's what that is. This is the
One's for Jim.
decommissioning plan?
Yep.
That's all the appendices.
And I
These are-
put one for
this
Jim.
is a group person.
Oh, you need, okay,
No, we'll get one for Jim later.
okay,
You
okay,
got
yeah,
one?
yep, you're fine, yeah, go ahead,
There's one right there.
okay. What page is that on?
That you just gave us here.
It would probably be easier to find it is that
Is
my
that the
April staff
April- yeah.
report?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would
Okay,
probably
thanks.
be easier to find there.
I got so many different reports in front of me.
All right, so that's this
So that,
picture,
yeah,
the
that's
second page.
the general
All right,
layout
can
of
we
the
just,
subject
when you talk,
location.
can we just state where we're looking at?
All right. So there is an existing dilapidated residence in the vicinity of River Road, kind of
Over here?
in the
Okay.
southwestern portion of the parcel. I did include a picture of the residence on my staff report. It was a recommendation of staff that this residence be removed as a part of the site plan application, as the residence would likely fall under a blighted property designation if it was reviewed by code enforcement.
Okay.
Based on the location of the town and the lack of density population there, it's likely that nobody has ever just called to complain, cause it's sort of
Stuck
off
in
the,
the woods.
sort of off the beaten path.
Okay.
So the application now does propose to remove that.
So, this was your initial staff report in April, and when they identified all of these items in your April staff report, they included a response saying that they would
Correct.
remove that structure.
Correct, a written response as well as it's denoted on the plan that the structure will be removed.
Thank you.
With regards to vegetative buffers, as indicated in my April staff report, the site plan currently proposes a 25-foot buffer along residential properties pursuant to town code. Staff recommends that a condition of approval be placed on the application that any vegetation along residential properties will be required to be a substantial size at the time of planting, as opposed to vegetation which will need time to grow to an appropriate size. That's recommended in order to mitigate any potential visual impacts to neighboring residences.
On the other applications for Solar One, what's going on for Solar Two, how are they addressing the tree size and the plan? Is that part of the EIS that was in Solar One?
That-
Or the,
Are you talking about the
Mitigate.
trees that will be planted?
yes,
And
was that part of the
And
impact
there'll be
statement
trees
and
that
how
are
that
native
would be
to our
mitigated?
area, correct?
More
Correct.
specifically?
Well, so the S-Power 1 EIS, did not specifically address the size of plants. Again, this is just something that's learned from institutional knowledge.
Mhm.
I have gone out and done several site inspections at the S-Power site and have noted that there are certain things to be desired just in terms of the size of planting.
Well, I'm
which
just
we-
saying,
we-
it's an,
we've-
it's an impact identified, right? In order to mitigate the impact that identified, we are saying what?
We're
That
sa-
you just
we're-
had to put
we're-
trees in there?
We're
or-
recommending that the trees be of significant size. Now, if the town board would like to establish a specific number as to the
Yeah.
height or the width of the trees,
Because
that's
we-
something that can be, analyzed, and the town board can provide comments as lead agency.
Because we do know that some of the other ones that we've seen before has been an issue with some of the plantings
Correct.
that has gone on around the solar, so I'd like to be more specific as to what is being required.
I would like to make sure we have trees that are native.
Continuing on with the vegetative buffers, the buffer along the western parcel in the vicinity of River Road in the current site plan does not appear to be 50-foot wide as required by Town Code 301-282E. A planting scheme which demonstrates a 50-foot buffer must be provided in this area.
So that was your staff report, and that's really for planning review,
Well,
planning board review
Correct.
under the site plan application, correct?
Well,
I mean, it would be a condition of special permit approval to ensure that, visual impacts are addressed, so, I mean.
Which we've done in the past, and we did with S-Power 1 in the special permit, requiring them to do the vegetative buffer along the recreation trail.
Correct. And then the northern, now this was something from the April staff report. The northern portion of the Long Island Sports Park parcel does not propose the 25-foot wide vegetative buffer. As the applicant had discussed with the town board at its May 9th, 2019 work session, this was out of concern that it would create shading issues for the farmland property, which is to the north of the subject parcel. Now, the town board should consider this and may wish to impose a condition that if the property to the north is ever developed, at that time, the applicant will be required to install a buffer. They may want it at the forefront, they may wish to have the applicant install it per code, they may require a landscaping bond, should the applicant not be able to provide this in the event that Nextera is no longer the lead agency or, the lead applicant on this. So that's something for the town board to consider.
And what the farmer next door, do we have any information from them, what it is that they feel? Do they feel that it would be shadowed or no?
We have not gotten comments from the farmer to the north.
Because we're making decisions on things we don't really. Because which way the sun, is depending on what they're planting there, which way the sun is coming and everything else, I think we should be able to, the applicant should be able to answer if they do the 25-foot buffer like we asked, whether it's going to add shade
Correct.
to that property, so that's a question for the applicant that they should be answering.
Correct. Realistically, if, they propose a row of arborvitaes that perhaps grow to 8 feet tall, what would the actual shading impacts be from an 8-foot tall arborvitae along this? Something for the applicant.
Whatever it
to
is,
address.
it's something the applicant should be answering, and we shouldn't be an unknown.
Correct. To address the special permit duration, the applicant has requested the initial 20-year special permit term as established in 301-282Q of the Town Code, as well as upfront requested 2 5-year extensions on the offset of the project. The Town Code is silent as to when the applicant can or must apply for these extensions, i.e. at the initial submission, after 5 years, 10 years, et cetera. So that is within the board's purview to grant the initial 20 years with the requested extensions.
Now, this was asked for S-Power 1 by Chris Kent and S-Power, correct? They,
But it is something that was not anticipated when the code was written. And I don't know, has anybody brought it back to code, have you guys put it back to code revision to be looked at? Because obviously this is something that's been requested, this is what, once, twice, now 3 times?
this is the second time it's been asked of us.
Remember?
Yeah,
Um,
so I
and-
would think
No,
that this would be
We
something
didn't
that,
discuss this
We
yet.
decided to leave the code as it is.
but
I
don't you think it should be something that should come to code revision for discussion? Whether it stays the same or not, who knows? But I think it's probably a question that should be discussed.
I can put that on our
Cause it's
agenda.
practice, right? It's common
What did we do
practice.
with S-Power 1? Did we do 20 years plus 2 5-year
We
extensions?
did, with all of them, we've done that.
Okay, so,
But my question is, if they're looking for 30 years, is it something?
We did 20 years with S-Power. To the best of my recollection, S-Power was not granted the 2 5-year extensions.
I believe they came back for the
They did.
extensions.
Did they?
They did,
Yes.
but I don't think the town board
Yeah,
granted.
I don't believe, again, to the
I
best of my
don't- I can't
recollection,
remember.
I can research that, but to the best of my knowledge,
I can't remember. So we denied them their 2 5-year extensions?
it never went for a public hearing.
Yeah,
correct.
never went through.
I know there was a lot of, because with S-Power 1, as well as the Article 10 process, there was a lot of SECRA-related activity regarding that whole process. Again, to the best of my recollection, I think the applicant just kind of didn't further
I'm just
that
bringing it up, I
request.
think it's something that that should be discussed within in the town as opposed to, because it seems to be common practice. So it's something the town should discuss to get a better handle on what it is their position is.
Well, right now our code says we can give 20 years, and it says that they can come back and ask for 2 5 years.
Absolutely, this is a separate conversation.
So even though in S-Power 1, it says that they were required to have 20 years plus 2 5-year extensions, I believe, if I'm not mistaken,
They were required to,
From
and
Lightbend,
and then
yes,
Chris Kent
in their
came
agreement.
in and asked the town board for the 2 5-year extensions
Yep.
now, to which the board did not grant.
Yep.
To the decommissioning aspect, the applicant has submitted a decommissioning plan with the application, which identifies an estimated decommissioning cost of the project of approximately $1.16 million. Town Code Section 301-283A6 states that projects of 10 acres or more shall provide a form of surety, either through escrow account, bond, or otherwise, to cover the cost of removal in the event that the town must remove the installation or remediate the landscape in an amount and form deemed reasonable by the town engineer. This surety must be provided to the town prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy or certificate of compliance.
I just have a question about that. I know that Ag and Markets, in one of their comments, as far as installation, that they recommend that while it's not in their state stuff,
Right,
but that they had recommend that we use the agricultural mitigation for solar energy projects.
Correct.
Was that reviewed, and are we, taking up that recommendation as requested by Ag and Markets, or no?
Again, this is only the second time that this has really been aired before the town board.
I understand
So
that. I'm just, have you guys considered it, or?
Yes, we have considered it, and I would
Okay.
defer to the town board whether they would like to imply some of those impose some of those mitigation measures. Now, it is noted that some of the mitigation measures are already inherently,
Right, but
apply for the
I
applicant,
noticed
so
one of
yes,
the part of it was not only in the decommissioning, but also in when the solar is set up, the way it's set up, and the removal of soil, things like that. So I was just wondering, have any of these been,
well, the
Suggested?
applicant will be able to address that, and they can be made conditions of a special permit approval if the town board so desires.
but also, we know that they're in secret, that it does have, if, this is what's being recommended, that as part of remaining the topsoil. I think, part of what we're being told is that the farmland can be farmed after, whether it's 20 or 30 years. I know that there was some conversation about that, but we know we do have guidelines for this, how to, and this is part of SECRA.
Correct.
To make sure that we are environmentally, we are reviewing the things that may occur due to this project, and we have recommendations from Ag and Markets how to prevent some of these things moving forward. So I think it's more than just the special permit. I think it's things that need to be reviewed in the secret process also.
And
So-
that can be included in any secret determination by the board, that in order to preserve the viability of the agricultural farmland, the applicant shall demonstrate compliance with the guidelines as indicated by Ag and Markets. I mean,
And the big,
Yeah, and I thought-
the big concern by Ag and Markets is that they retain the prime ag soils on the subject property and they're not exported off the property.
Well, no, I think it's more than that, because this is stripping topsoils when you're making any roads, any parking. I don't know if they're making any of that in ag land, what they're doing with the soil for that, how they're preserving it at the time. And then it's also the way it's buried, when you put in the actual physical panels themselves, the stanchions for that, as well as the electrical, how the conduits that are occurring, whether they stay there, buried there, or they get removed there. So there's a whole list of things. I just got this yesterday. I briefly read it, so I've not had a chance to thoroughly go through it and see what applies, what doesn't apply. I just know in just a brief review that these are some of the questions that are being raised, and I'm just asking if they were considered and where we're at.
I mean, just to speak to one of those comments, right here in the Ag and Markets guidelines, electric interconnect cables and transmission lines installed above ground can create long-term interference with mechanized farming on agricultural land. Thus, interconnect cables must be buried in agricultural fields whenever possible. Interconnect cables and transmission lines installed above ground must be located outside field boundaries wherever possible.
Mhm.
So, I mean, they are proposing to bury them underground.
But over the ag land or no?
Through the Ag Markets, as well
Okay.
as through a neighboring parcel, which they'll require an easement for, and underneath the Long Island Sports Park parcel. So they are complying with that guideline.
Greg, just correct me if I'm wrong on this. I thought that as far as the viability of the soil afterwards, you had gotten that information, you called up there and they gave you that information?
yes.
But someone was complaining, I think, that it wasn't actually in writing on the website or?
Well, that comment was never provided to me in writing. I spoke, and this was, I made the call to the New York State Ag and Markets, to the preparer of those documents who submitted them for the Article 10 process, because there was a comment that after 20 years, it loses the ability to farm. So I wanted clarification on that, because that's a very broad statement and has wide-ranging implications. So I wanted to understand the basis for that. And what I was told, again, it was not in writing, it was told verbally, that it had to do with the ability to find someone to farm the soil. It had no reference to the nutrients of the soil, the contents, the viability of the actual farmland. It had to do with the ability to find someone to farm that crop.
So has the study been done on the other though?
The
On
other-
the, actually how the soil is, not finding someone?
I do not believe so. To that, I mean,
Because I've heard varying opinions on that, that's what's.
So I do, just in terms of viability of farming and agricultural soil, on the northeast corner of Middle Country Road and Wading River Manorville Road, there is a parcel which was historically farmed. Farming ceased on that property for probably 20 to 30 years. In recent years, I believe it's actually Fink's Farm has leased the land. They cleared the trees, and the land basically reforested itself. The applicant cleared the trees. They did so with Pine Barrens approval, and they imposed clearing limits. But that land is now being actively and productively farmed after 30 years of not being farmed. So I mean, if the town board likes, we can ask the applicant to provide some sort of science for that. But that is a real world example of something reforesting itself, being cleared, and now being actively farmed again.
Yeah, and that's a good point, it's just that we're such an agricultural area, I would like to see the scientific findings.
But once again, that's part of the secret process. It's not up to the town, it's up to us to ask the applicant these questions and have the applicant provide us with the response of that. That is the point of secret. This is, we're identifying potential environmental impacts that may occur from citing this project here, and then asking the questions of the applicant, you know, what is the status of this, and what's going to happen? These are the questions and concerns we have about citing it here.
Okay.
You know, and once again, I'll go back to the mitigation here. You know, it does have, and this is to your point, Catherine, too, it does have about stockpiling, the topsoil stripped away from the work areas, That's one bullet. One of the other one is when the buried cable, alter natural saturation of the soil horizons and natural drainage patterns, that those are looked at also, to make sure that that is being done correctly when going through that property. And then they have a minimum depth of 48 inches of cover. You know, all of these things are, you know, they're doable, easily doable, but they need to be addressed.
Yeah.
Is that what they're proposing on their site plan, their resubmission on the site plan of August 27th?
Perhaps the applicant could address, the depth of cable. I mean, I don't wanna
Let's-
put the applicant on the
I don't-
spot, but
let-
I think it would be appropriate for them to have time to respond to these
I
and
do.
address them. I mean, this is a high-level overview to address some of the concerns raised in the staff report, as well as at the the special town board meeting last
And that
week.
goes
Go,
back-
continue through, Seth.
And that goes back to what I originally said, is the preservation of the prime resource, which is the prime ag soils, and to keep those on site. And the things that everybody's mentioning are the ways to do it. And I believe the applicant has agreed to keep all the prime ag soils on the subject property.
But
in general, they can provide the details on how they propose to
It's
do
the
it.
details. I mean,
Okay.
we all know that the devil over this is in the details, always on these projects.
Correct.
Just going through Pine Barrens, per comments received from the Pine Barrens Commission during the secret referral process, the project must demonstrate compliance with all relevant sections of the Central Pine Barrens Comprehensive Land Use Plan as indicated in their June 20th, 2019 secret response. The applicant, again, has...
This is compatible growth area, right? It's not,
Correct.
yeah.
Correct.
And how much of it's compatible growth area?
I don't have that information off the top of my head, but I can get that for you and provide
I
that.
think it's all in the compatible growth. I don't think there's any core area on this
Yeah,
property.
no, there is no core.
But it
I-
can't
I
all be
just-
compatible
I don't-
growth,
I don't-
otherwise
I
they
don't
wouldn't
know-
allow
I
to
don't
put
know
that
if there's a
much solar.
line on the, I know the Long Island Sports Park parcel is all CGA. I don't know if there's a line of demarcation at some point on the western parcel. I can find that out, but it
The
will.
applicant should know. I
it
mean,
will
when they
re-
come up, we can ask.
And again, the New York State DEC, the application will require a New York State DEC WSRR Article 15 permit. The site plan demonstrates that construction will take place outside of the 100-foot New York State DEC regulated freshwater wetland buffer, and as such, obviates the need for a freshwater wetland Article 24 permit. I did provide, as an attachment here, I do have an email correspondence with a environmental plans reviewer from the New York State DEC. Just to clarify their comments, as per our phone conversation, DEC has no objection to the town of Riverhead acting as lead agency under SECRA. At this time, we have no comments to provide the town for the SECRA review. The proposal falls within a recreational portion of the Peconic River and therefore will require a WSRR permit. A freshwater wetland permit could also be required due to the project's proximity to a regulated wetland, which again demonstrated in their site plan drawings, demonstrates that the proposed disturbance is outside of that 100-foot regulated area.
What portion, where is the WSR on the project?
I believe the whole western parcel in it, but again, I don't want to misspeak, so I will get
Okay,
that
yep, no,
information and
that's fine.
I can provide.
And
we
being in the WSR, what limitations does that create? Or what is the purpose of the WSR
I'm not
zoning?
familiar with the comprehensive WSRR regulations. It probably has to deal with use, the amount of clearing, amount of development. Again, I can't speak to the specifics of it, but we can get that information for the town board.
Well, it says that they have to have a WSRR
Yeah.
permit prior to construction, so you will get, the DEC, who are the experts, will go through that WSRR permit and issue them a permit, which you will be waiting for in order to issue the building permit for the solar panels, correct?
The issuance of that permit would demonstrate compliance with the regulations of the WSRR.
I'd
Right.
just like to know how much of it is in the WSR.
And also going
And
back
what-
to the Pine Barrens Commission letter, it does say that both of the tax parcels are located in the industrial zoning district in Calverton in the compatible growth area of the Central Pine Barrens. So that question's answered in the Pine Barrens letter. Both of them are in the compatible growth area.
Right, but it doesn't mean the whole property is compatible.
It says that it is.
We'll find out for you.
Yeah,
We'll
it's,
confirm it.
yeah.
So, that,
Well, I just, okay.
I mean,
So do they have to
that's
be-
what I've got, that's,
So is this-
summarizes my memory.
Is this gonna be development then? If it's all in the compatible growth area, then this would be considered development on this property?
There are
Cause then you're at
There are,
65%.
there are certain thresholds which
that's the clearing limit.
there are certain thresholds which constitute development. Again, the applicant will need to demonstrate compliance with those.
The special
And we
permit.
will refer again to the Pine Barrens to ensure that The most recent revisions demonstrate compliance with any applicable Pine Barrens acts.
Okay.
It says right here, the EAF identifies 125.8 acres, approximately 64% of the site will be physically disturbed for the project. It says in the Pine Barrens letter.
And then,
All right, so they're under 65% then?
Yep.
Okay.
I'd like to touch upon some of the other more significant questions that were raised at the November 13th meeting. One of the concerns was potential contamination of groundwater, because there was a belief that there was gonna be cadmium and lead used in the panels. I'm gonna have the applicant speak to that, but they are not using either cadmium or lead in the panels.
And they answered that, we have that document. where they
And
answered
I
those.
did speak with Ryan Galleria from S-Power. They do not use cadmium or lead in their panels. They use a product that's called cadmium telluride, which is not the same as either of those compounds. It's non-volatile, non-water soluble. The vapor pressure is the ambient conditions, and if you light it on fire, is 0. So it's impossible for any vapors or dust generated by it to become airborne. The melting point is 1905 degrees Fahrenheit for it to become flammable.
So was
I'm
lead and cadmium, did it used to be used, well, we'll ask the applicant,
Yeah.
did it used to be used, is this was there an issue found with it and they changed it over? And do the panels need to stay, if the question is whether these things leak into the
Correct.
ground, and if they do, how is this tested through the life of the project to make sure that at some point these chemicals are not found to be chemicals that leach, and how is that being addressed?
I think the applicant can
the
address
applicant's gonna
the
address it.
composition of it, so that's one question, that I think the applicant can address. Another really important question was, there was a statement made that there are 11 inverters, and each of them are gonna contain 650 gallons of fuel oil. It's not fuel oil, it's mineral oil, which is basically a vegetable oil. And I spoke with David Andruskevich, our fire marshal, about it this morning, and he confirmed that it is like a vegetable oil. And it's used in every single transformer and every single power line across the country.
At those concentrations, does it have any impact at all?
They're
on-
not considered to be toxic materials.
And then-
But-
and they're not considered to be hazardous to the
But
public
my
health.
question is, if you have it on ag land, does it disturb the soil there?
No.
You know that?
It's inside the transformer.
I don't know,
No,
but
this-
this,
Well,
they
the-
do
there
it-
was
it-
a leak.
the applicant can
There was
address any
something
sort
about
of
mitigating
spill
if there's a
mitigation
leak.
measures. I mean,
I mean, just
we're
where
not-
is it being stored? I mean, if
Yeah.
it's not stored on ag land, if it has
And
an
they can
impact, then,
address And then further, David provided me the cut sheet from the National Fire Prevention Manual, based upon the NFPA rating system. This is on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the non-toxic or non-hazardous, 10 being the most extreme. From a health standpoint, it's a 1. From a flammability standpoint, it's a 1. Instability is a 0. So that's per the state building code, state fire code.
Jeff, can we back up a minute? In the part I read about the mineral oil, it said procedures will be in place. In the unlikely event of a spill,
Mhm.
what are the procedures?
I think
That's a question for the applicant.
Okay,
Another question that was raised was growth-inducing aspects and how many solar farms there are in the town and Long Island.
Cumulative aspects, not
And,
growth
correct.
Right.
And I have prepared the attached 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4. Here you go. One for me. Here, copies for anybody else.
While he's distributing that, I'll also note, in response to one of the comments, there was a comment that the inverters explode or catch fire every day at 7 o'clock. I spoke with the fire marshal, he spoke with the Riverhead Fire Department chief. To date, there has been no fire department response to any of the solar installations that are located within the town of Riverhead.
I don't think that, I think our solar is fairly new. I think the question was that historically, for solar farms, that there is this fear. I mean, he was also addressing places in California where the electrical lines sometimes also cause fires. So I don't know, the question would be to the applicant, what is the occurrence in the Northeast of this happening on longstanding solar farms, and what are some of the other aspects that happen, to address the issue, that is the question. There are reports of fires and how is that, what is the likelihood of that occurring statistically?
Right, it just said there's a low likelihood of a fire, but that doesn't rule it out.
The document that I handed out to you is a summary sheet of all the solar projects that are either built and operational
Which
or
sheet
under.
are we looking at, this one?
That
Okay.
is correct, yes. Right now, this is our 5th project in Riverhead.
And they're all located in Industrial C?
They're all, yes, in the Calverton zip code. And I provided the
But
acreage.
only on Industrial C, correct?
I
Or
don't
is it
There
other?
there are some in industrial A as well.
On the east side of it.
Correct, there's one on the east side of Edwards.
2 on each side.
Two on each
STR and then, S-Power 0.
All right.
Yeah,
and
certainly a
put-
concern for 11933
And
that
I
all
think
landed in that area.
Yeah, and it just has a location of the concentration of industrial zone land in that area. During the review of, the supplemental for S-Power 1, in the supplemental, the applicant's environmental consultant provided a narrative on the build-out of solar farms across Long Island. That's the orange one that I handed out to you. And the ones that are highlighted orange are those that are, in Riverhead. And my table updates that further, because this was from, 2 years ago.
Well, I think you can certainly see from the first 2 solar projects, and then S-Power 1, S-Power 2, and NextEra, those 3 projects together are an incredible amount of property compared to the first 2 solar projects. I think when the first, what, you got 45 acres and 13, right? So you have, 58 acres out of 656 acres. I think that the size and scale of projects coming in are much, much larger. And I think that, you know, it is important for the town to consider the loss of jobs in industrial C due to this. I mean, when you're losing 58 acres is much different than, losing close to 600 acres of industrial property in the town of Riverhead, and we know from the project narrative, not one person will be working here. It's gonna be monitored remotely from Florida, correct? So it's, you know, that is a cumulative, that is an effect on our community here to not have the job production out of the site. And I think it's something that we need to, as a town board, need to consider, whether that is something that is in the best interest of the town. It may or may not be, but I certainly think it's something, you know, we need to take a look at. How many other industrial properties do we have in Industrial C to be able to produce these jobs? Because how much acreage is in an Industrial C?
I don't disagree with you that I would rather have the jobs here, but I think more important of a question is, on this 656 acres, which is cumulative projects, how much commercial square footage could be built, and how many cars that would create, and how many, you know, jobs potentially that would create? Because I think that would be more of a positive declaration under SECRA, is determining how many cars would be traveling from the expressway to these Industrial C properties, and how many applications have come in on Industrial C properties in the corridor since the legislation and the code was changed in 2004, because I don't think there have been many.
No.
Well, and along the same lines, the benefits are really going to the South Shore during their busy season, correct?
It doesn't
Well,
say
I
where
mean,
the power's
the
going.
town does receive a pilot payment, the town does receive, there is a community benefit agreement that has been enacted in the first S-Power. There is some precedent and there is some sort of establishment as to the, like a host community benefit agreement throughout the state for some of these larger solar projects.
But we don't know what the impact is, right? Because we're taking our Riverhead Town industrial property that we could potentially have jobs on to help support our community here, because that has certainly a ripple effect. You know, if you have somebody in the town making, you know, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, owning a home in the town and spending locally, you know, it has a big effect on the town. But now we're taking all of our industrial property, we're putting solar with no jobs. Granted, we do get a pilot, but we're also, we're giving a regional benefit. We're taking our jobs away from the town of Riverhead and giving a regional benefit to all of, and I'm very much so, on the South Shore. Because this is going to the substation on Edwards Avenue, and we know that PSE&G is taking that substation and taking the energy from there and heading it towards the South Shore. So we're giving up our industrial jobs in the town of Riverhead to supply energy elsewhere. And I think that has a very big impact on our community when we see solar projects of this size. And it may be something that the community embraces, I'm not saying one way or the other, but I think we need to know what it is that we're doing here and able to make a decision on, you know, moving forward.
Well, and
I
to
don't,
that-
I don't disagree with you, and that's frankly something that at this point, I think this application was sort of brought this issue to a head, and I think that is something that the town board does need to consider.
But to
'Cause
that
I do
point-
agree,
sorry,
you know, when
Greg.
you, but, as you said, you had 58 acres for the first couple, now you're talking about multiplying that by more than 10 times. Now, you know, you could look at it, and not gonna get into an analysis now, but what is the remaining acreage available in solar? Keep in mind, the town does have EPCAL as a resource, which is sort of envisioned to be the economic engine for the town. You know, one could make the argument that if there's less available land in the industrial A and industrial C, it would inherently make that EPCAL land more valuable to develop. So there is.
Or they
there-
could work synergistically.
There is discussion to be had, and I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, I think that's the point.
So-
And to that point, I think that's another reason why we really should be giving the public an opportunity to weigh in on this. And certainly, when you're looking at it regionally, Riverhead has done their part.
So on the 600 acres at EPCAL, I think the potential build-out on that 600 acres is 10 million square feet and 5,000 jobs and employees going to that job. And I don't think that the 11933 zip code would like 5,000 people going to and from and down Edwards Avenue to get to these industrial properties. But, and that's,
Well, then why do we zone it industrial there?
well, it was zoned that way in 2004, and you guys are undertaking a new master plan to determine where else in the town we can put this industrial type zoning for the type of jobs, because like I said, since I've been here in 2010, I've seen very few applications come in industrial C. Which
But
is why we
All the
decided,
reason why we need to update the master plan.
But we can also see that, you know, this conversion here of this property here has value. Today it's solar, tomorrow it may be high-tech jobs. You know, these Solar One, Solar Two, and Nextera all of these projects have come in within the past 2 years, correct? 2.5, 3 years?
About
3
3
years,
and a half,
right?
I guess.
So
since the
we have,
governor's incentive.
so we have 600 acres that are being converted to one industry in our industrial area, and I, like I said, I don't know one way or the other, whether it's positive or negative, but that's certainly the portion of a project like this, and SECR, that's what you'd have the conversation about, is what are the impacts of a project, and how do you evaluate the impacts of a project in light of long-term planning in the town of Riverhead?
right.
I mean, that's.
And I believe that the report showed that the environmental impact of solar, without any tree clearing and without any car generation and without, anything in that nature, that this was a negative declaration because there were none of those environmental impacts, whereas, you know, 10 million square feet of build out on Edwards Avenue could potentially be an environmental impact, especially for the residents in the 11933 zip code.
But I'm gonna say you base it on the comprehensive plan supports this being an industrial area.
And I
With,
think-
with those things, and that's what's been adopted by the town as part of their comprehensive plan. So that the intention, you know, to say, well, you know, the use there is, you
saying.
can't really take into account the use that is zoned there, so you can negate that use,
I'm
which
just
is kind of
saying-
just the opposite.
I'm just saying, if you're gonna do the comparison, and we're going to be fully transparent, the public should know, in 11933, the potential of the number of jobs that could be created in the industrial C zoning at full build-out, and how many cars are anticipated to travel up and down Edwards Avenue. People complain every day that they're having a hard enough time to get down Edwards Avenue from the expressway to get to their houses in the Calverton vicinity. And where solar does not generate any cars, that type of potential development could be, I mean,
Well, I think
an
that's-
astounding impact on the residents that live in 11933.
And I think that's the whole point of SECR, is to be able to analyze those things to make a decision.
Right, so just do the comparison, that's all. I mean,
Well,
if
it's not,
they're,
we
if
asked
they're
the applicant.
saying, if they're saying, you know, that they would rather see it built out and jobs created, I don't disagree with that, but what the impact would be to the 11933 zip code for that to occur. I mean, the master plan was also done designing 500 apartments for downtown with no parking facilities. So now we're faced with that problem. So, yeah, these are, you know, future impacts that could be discussed, but as far as what I'm seeing, in the pilot payments and the disturbance to the residents in the 11933 zip code, me being one of them, this is a benign use
Well,
compared to full build out.
I have to say, I live a mile from Edwards. I don't know, I haven't seen any traffic. I mean, obviously, we have traffic during our big season, but I haven't seen any huge traffic problems
Well,
on
I do,
Edwards
when I
Avenue.
come from the expressway and I go down to the FedEx building and I'm backed up 20 cars and, 10 traffic signal changes before I can make a right-hand turn onto 25 to head east, right now, that exists.
Well, it is a fast light.
And I go back to, that's why it's so important to examine these things during the secret process for a project. So, go ahead, did you wanna?
That's all I have.
Yeah, I'm good. If there's any remaining questions, I believe at this point, the
Um,
applicant can address some of the outstanding concerns, but I've detailed my report. I think we've gotten some important relevant comments from the board at this point.
I just had one question. I know in the, I think it was the archaeological, whatever, there was supposed to a 1A and a 1B. In the appendix, I saw the one thing there. Is that the satisfaction of the 1A and 1B? I know it has
So,
no impact,
yeah.
but I just couldn't find what was what.
Yeah, so, I mean, the comment as uploaded into the Cultural Resource Information System, which is how things are coordinated with, the SHPO office.
Is that how it, okay.
The Lorraine Weiss, they did a survey and evaluation, stated that I have reviewed the information submitted on built resources and will not require any additional building surveys to be conducted. There are no resources eligible for listing on the state or national register of historic places in the involved project.
So that's considered the response, because I saw,
That's it.
that's the 1A, 1B, right? That, is both of them?
That-
That's the conclusion of their, response.
I think maybe the applicant can address some of these more pointed, specific questions.
Okay, I
There
just
was an
wasn't sure.
extensive archaeological review done with the HRNA study, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that said that the archaeological significance was along River Road, along the Peconic River. So,
And the site has been substantially disturbed as a result of the golf course, and the non-disturbance areas are the wetland areas, and they're not proposing to touch the wetland areas.
My question just was, I saw there was a 1B somewhere, and I just wasn't sure what that was, and if the response that was in here sufficed for both of that.
And Greg, I appreciate how you handled yourself
Thank you.
Thank you.
and your work.
Nice job, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does the board have any they want to address with the applicant? We have the applicant's
Yeah,
environmental
I
team, we
think,
have the
I think
attorney.
we can ask some questions, but before we do that, can we just see the site plan, because I believe there was changes to it, we've not seen this before, could you just explain what changes?
I mean, I did sort of detail a lot of them. I mean, this is a significant packet to go through. I mean, here's a high-level overview of the project. I don't know if the board
Where are
wants
the
to-
electrical lines? So right
the
now, there
electrical-
is
The
no,
electrical line here is western parcel, Long Island Sports Park. The underground connection transverses the western parcel,
but right now
goes
there is,
up through here. Right now, there's no electrical.
right, so right now, this project
Right now,
has
there's-
is just a project without any electricity,
Correct.
and
And
any
I've-
energy being
I've
produced.
driven, I did a site visit, I drove the entirety of this site, I drove the entirety of the Long Island Sports Park parcel, so I have witnessed what's out there. Currently, the applicant did install a small fenced-in installation, which they got a permit for, which was done for a solar analysis, I think something to demonstrate the efficiency of the panels.
And this is an easement on
So
somebody
thi-
else's property?
This would be required, no, this would be required to have an easement underneath, and I believe this is the back nine of the Long Island Sports Park.
So they don't own this, or they do? This
No,
is
they
the
do not- they do
This is
not
the
own
other
it.
solar, this is solar?
No, right now, this is a unused parcel, it was the back nine of the Calverton Links, when it was the golf course.
Okay, so
So they
this,
would propose an easement underneath here,
but somebody else owns this?
somebody else owns that.
Do they have this easement already? We don't know.
That's
Yes.
a question.
the
Okay.
Canoe Lake easement, is that?
No,
No.
and the applicant could speak to the
We could
Canoe
s-
Lake,
okay.
the Canoe
So-
Lake property, so they're proposing the underground Gentile line here, which would then cross a neighboring parcel, come onto the Long Island Sports Park parcel, transverse through here. They have a step-up facility here, and then it would go underneath Edwards Avenue to the PSEG substation.
Okay, and then how big is that?
How big is that?
My one, yeah.
I don't have a scale on me, perhaps the applicant.
Okay,
could
we can
speak to that,
we
but
can ask them.
I think at
ask
this
them.
point, a lot of the questions
And
would be pointed.
where right now is the ag land?
The ag land is here,
That's, okay, so,
and they're proposing it on the ag land again. There's a large block of existing contiguous vegetation on the western parcel, disturbances outside of that, and there's also a block of contiguous vegetation here, the disturbance is outside of that.
Okay, and this is not owned by them?
No,
Okay.
no, this is the Canoe Lake, this is Canoe Lake, this is owned by the New York State DEC.
It's DEC, all DEC. And these dots coming up, what is that?
That indicates the wetland.
That's the
areas.
wetland up to here, and that, is there, and then here's wetland also?
Correct, and they do show, I mean, I don't know if you wanna go through every page of this, but
I
they
just
do
wanna-
show, they do show the wetland areas, they do show the buffer areas, and they do demonstrate where the construction is and where it is not.
And I know in some of the, just before we have them come up, in some of the appendix, there was identified, was there endangered or just,
There was tiger salamanders which were identified within 40 yards of the property, which is presumed to be on the Canoe Lake parcel. It's worth noting, obviously, they would need to coordinate and need permits from the DEC. The application does not appear as if it would cut off any migratory routes or any sort of habitat or impact any habitat that would be viable for these
okay,
creatures.
and nothing in here?
No.
And where are the ponds they're taking up?
The ponds that they're taking up are, I believe they're right up in here. Yeah, they're sort of in the vicinity by the parking lot, kind of adjacent to the Hampton Jidge property.
Hey, Tim, maybe we can get some of our golf balls back.
Oh,
That's what I said, yeah.
Greg,
Several
where in
there.
all of this is the habitat that is
The-
on these
It is
parcels?
indicated in the full EAF, they did do a wildlife assessment here. And I, frankly, those questions I'm gonna leave to the environmental analyst for the applicant.
And the DEC, when they apply for the Wild Scenic Recreational Rivers, will make recommendations as to the curbs and how they have the downside on one side of the curb so that tiger mount salamanders can get into the
Culverts and
area
all.
where they
Yep.
can, you know, they can migrate into those areas, but they can't get out, because then at the other end of the curb, it's gonna be a wall for them, so they won't be able to climb back up on the wall, but they'll be able to climb over the wall to get into the ponds, but not back out of that area. And soon, they will no longer be threatened endangered species, because somebody brought one up from North Carolina where they use it for bait, and now they are all over the place.
Alrighty,
Tastes like chicken.
gentlemen,
I know.
I
You see mine, it's all
Good
different.
that Jim's not here a lot.
You know what, Greg,
Does
this,
everybody have a copy of this?
Which one is this
I don't- well,
One.
I brought
Yes.
extras. I just wanted to
The
make
leaf?
sure.
Those were your responses to the questions the
Yeah.
other day?
Okay, great.
Yes.
Jefferson,
Actually, I have
this would be helpful to put up on the website also, which were answers to the questions of November 13th that were brought up.
I thought those were on the website.
Those were not, we got those yesterday,
okay.
we emailed those to you, yesterday.
Yep.
We'll put this on the website.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful, because you know what, there was a lot that was said at that meeting, that this answers very specifically that they're either false, or that they've been addressed under the secret review by the planning staff.
Will do.
Thank you.
All right. I agree, these should be on the website.
So,
hi.
how are you?
Good.
Steve LaSquadra on behalf of Long Island
Mhm.
Solar. I know it often referred to as NextEra, but obviously, as
Long
you
Island
know,
Solar, yeah.
Long Island Solar is a collaborative effort between NextEra and National Grid. I'll just ask my colleagues here to introduce themselves.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Start here, I'm Prescott Hartshorn, I'm with National Grid Ventures, which is the commercial development arm of National Grid.
You know, Michael Dowling, Project Director for NextEra Energy Resources, running obviously the LI Solar project with the one here.
I'm Bill Bohr with NextEra Energy. I'm a project manager for environmental services.
I'm Chris Corrado from National Grid. I'm the manager of Downstate New York Environmental.
So, I think maybe the best thing is, and I know we'll dive into a lot of back and forth, maybe just a few preliminary remarks.
Sure, yep.
Starting off with, look, I think it's very fair to say that this has been an extraordinarily well-vetted project. There's been a great amount of work that's been done over a very sustained period of time. I appreciate that your planning staff commended the applicant. I think that was very gracious of them to do. I think also it's very accurate. Speaking of collaborative efforts, there was a very collaborative effort between the applicant here and your staff. Many documents prepared and received and revised over many months. I can tell you this, and I think it's fair to say, just as planning staff commended the applicant, I have to commend your planning staff. as someone who's worked in and around planning and land use matters all across the island over the better part of 30 years, I can tell you something that I think you probably already know, which is that your staff here is particularly well regarded on a regional basis. They're very exacting, and they're very demanding, and they ask for quite a few things over a long period of time. I think the good thing about that process is that the applicant always responded, and in a very timely manner, and all revisions that were requested were made, and all documents or information that were sought were timely given. And further, what happened is the applicant was able at all times to meet with whomever staff recommended that we meet with, whether it be at a work session with you or with the planning board or with staff in sessions to go back and forth over all the type of documents and information that would be required. I think it's also fair to say that from our perspective, but also from staff's perspective, documents have been fully submitted for many months. Obviously, we're happy to be here today because to the extent that there are issues that have just come up or people have further questions, we want to answer them. We do want to be able to move forward. Obviously, we want fairness in the process. We want transparency, as we all do. We also want thoroughness, and I think that's what we're all striving to achieve here today. Obviously, a project hangs in the balance. We don't want that to be jeopardized, especially with all the work that's been done and all the good faith that's been engaged in over so many months, many, many months. Having said that, I think it's also fair to say that from our perspective, but I think also from an objective perspective, this is really a low to zero impact project in the following senses. The land here is not being reshaped or changed. This is already cleared land. And in fact, great pains were taken consistent with where we've seen solar codes across the island go, and also here in Riverhead, to not touch any trees. There's no clearing. Also, consistent with staff's request, great pains were taken to not seek setbacks or to go outside of area requirements or other requirements imposed by your code. So when you factor that in with the benefits that we see, which are that as opposed to, let's say, a vast industrial build-out, which brings traffic and pollution and all sorts of things that we know in a community such as Riverhead, where there's such a great interest and emphasis on preserving the character of the community. This would avoid those things, but yet bring needed revenue. Not just jobs for the build-out of the project, but also tax revenue that would benefit particularly a school district, but of course the municipality as well. Having said those things, this is how I think it would be best for us to proceed. Mr. Dowling, who prepared the overview together with all of our experts and staff, and I should say too that in addition to the gentleman that you have here today, there are many people behind the scenes, engineers, environmental experts, other people who did a lot, not just to prepare all the documents that were submitted over the course of the past year or so, but also to answer these additional questions that have cropped up, particularly from the November 13th meeting. So all of that is brought to bear in what we're going to present today. And what I'd like to do is start off with Mr. Dowling, who's going to address the overview that you have. And then after that, I think we could perhaps answer any additional questions or things that arise either that you have remaining from November 13th, or even things that just come from our discussion today.
Well, I just want to clarify too, that this is the first time for this project that the board is sitting down to determine its significance here. So, you know, while I appreciate that the planning staff has had a lot of the information, and we appreciate all their work and the information they've shared back with us, this is the first time that we're actually sitting down with the planning board to actually even discuss SECRA. As you've seen, some of these documents are documents that the board is just seeing now also. So I just want to put that fact out there, you know, as we go through the documents.
There was just to answer, there was a town work session with the board on May 9th. We did have one.
Right, we had one on May 9th on the project, and that's when we were putting lead agency, so there was we didn't even know if we were going to be lead agency in that. That's when we requested lead agency out to the other other entities, so that wasn't, had nothing to do
Okay,
with the
I just-
secret at
yep.
that point. I just wanna be
Yep,
clear
I just
about
wanna-
that too.
we have met with the
Okay.
town board, I just wanted to make
and
sure that.
the public hasn't really had an opportunity to weigh in. It was just sort of a fast thrown together meeting the other day and nobody had a lot of time to prepare.
So, you, and the
Not
planning
because of
board
you
did
guys.
request lead agency on this, correct?
No.
No.
No, okay. So you did meet with the planning staff on March 7th of 2018 at a public work session, correct?
Correct.
You did meet with the planning board on June 12th, 2018 at a public work session, correct?
Yes, also.
That was the planning staff, again.
You did meet with the town board at a work session on May 9th,
Correct.
and then you did meet with the planning board again on August 1st
Correct.
of 2019?
Yes.
Okay, so you've been publicly speaking about this project on 4 different occasions.
Correct.
And were any of them about secret?
They were about the overall project, which
Okay,
Secret
but
was a part of.
Part of, right,
Yes.
but nothing with the deciding board that would decide
No,
on
no,
secret,
just
correct?
the overall
Okay.
project.
But
Okay.
the questions were raised by the planning board that are probably similar to the questions that we're asking you today, correct?
Yes.
Yes, I would note too that the planning board's interest with respect to secret-based items was fairly intense. They did ask a lot in that public session.
But
So maybe just-
that's what we had asked you guys for, if you could provide us that information?
You said there weren't written comments?
They did not provide written comments. I
But-
mean, we can pour through the minutes and provide, bullet points of what their pointed questions.
Yeah, I think that would be good, thank you.
So first, does everyone have the document we've prepared? Maybe we can just
Yes.
walk through it. I don't want to, for the sake of not repeating ourselves, I think
Yep,
we'll just
no,
do everyone
yeah,
some
go
good
ahead.
just to run through it. So to cover the procedural background that has happened so far, and address some of the items that were brought up in the special meeting, there seemed to be some concern that there hasn't been thorough due diligence or timing on this, or it's being rushed through. I don't think that is the case at all.
And I don't think it was directed at your,
good. I
to
just
you
wanna
guys
make sure.
at all. We understand that you put the application in over a year ago. We'll take that on us, that we could have done better with our timing, because we do know that you were to go before PSEAG and the board. And I'm going to say that through our timing, we can still not shirk our duties as to reviewing it, so I do recognize
Understood.
that.
Yep, I just wanted to address some items
Yeah,
that came out of
yeah, I
last
just
week.
wanna-
We did, and the planning staff, by the way, has been great, and so have both the boards we've talked to, it's been very conducive and a good relationship so far.
And it's actually been almost 2 years in January since you submitted the
September 18,
application.
September 2018 is when the original package was submitted.
So a little over a year.
So since.
It'll
and-
be about a year and 3 months, yes.
So
Year
to
and 4
say some of the
months.
things the planning staff, and they've done a great job, so before we even submitted our initial permit package, we went through some prior applications to make sure we had feedback from the planning staff, town board, and planning board. We went to great lengths to incorporate that all into our permit package, so we wouldn't have to do anything that was done previously. We also met with the planning staff twice before our permit package to make sure everything was incorporated. After we submitted that package, we did have a working session with both the town board and the planning board. When designing the project, we went to great lengths to make sure we adhered to your solar ordinance, that we wouldn't have to ask for any variances on the solar ordinance. We made sure that there would be no tree clearing, which I think is very unique for a solar project. No native trees are being removed. As the planning staff said, we're also conserving a large swath of trees over on our west parcel, and we're not gonna touch those at all.
So how many acres of trees over there is that you're?
I think it's, Bill, it's about 30 acres roughly, maybe 25, 30 acres.
So 30 acres on the overall project size is what, 197, 198?
It's
somewhere?
the two
So-
parcels
Together.
together.
And of those, you're preserving about 30.
Yeah, and that's the big swath of trees we're not touching at all, but just to note out, there are trees on the eastern parcel that we are also not touching.
And just out of curiosity, so the 30 acres is what percentage of the overall project?
Call it 30 over 200, so 15% roughly.
15%, and the whole thing is in compatible growth area?
Yes.
So in compatible growth area, you can only develop 65% of the parcels?
We have adhering to all the compatible.
So, but
growth
I'm just saying, it's
restrictions.
also, it's, while you're you're preserving the trees, but it's also, you couldn't develop the project without preserving 35% of, not developing on 35% of the property, is that correct?
Well, we proposed not to develop them, correct, so that goes into that calculation.
But, right, so it goes into that I just wanna, yeah, okay.
And also, 30 acres, that's just that western parcel, you're preserving a majority of the trees elsewhere on the property.
Correct,
In
that
addition
we-
to that.
No, I commend you for, working the two together
Right.
in the project. I know that you can only build out on 65%, but to do it so that it's not doing the trees is, yeah, I think that's something the community likes.
So then when we were at the planning board, actually, we asked some of the comments, so some of the comments we had actually put into our application after that meeting. They asked,
So you have the comments from the
they
planning
were,
board?
they were verbal. They asked us
Okay.
to do it and we did it.
Was that a work
Can't
session?
seem to locate them.
You know, we believe in doing the right thing, so when they asked us to do it, we did
We
it.
have the dates, we can always watch the
Yeah.
work sessions.
Absolutely.
And we can provide you with a list of our revisions to the site plans as a result of that meeting.
So two of those requests were, one, we had already adhered to the setbacks, and they asked us to set back our panels even further, which, from residential areas. We were already within the code. They asked us to set them back even further. We granted that request and revised our site plans to do so. Another one was to revise our landscaping plan, and plant some additional trees as well as change the spacing in between the trees, which we were able to grant. You know, I wanna walk through some of the other items here,
Yeah,
but
go
as
ahead.
Steve said, you know, we've put a lot of work into this. The planning staff has done a great job and put a lot of work into this, and we think we're ready to move forward and really wanna start a dialogue to make sure we can move forward. So here are
That's
some.
what this is all about.
Yep, nope, so some of the items that were brought up, and we can walk through this together, was the composition of the solar panels. There was some information out there that they contain cadmium, which is not true and incorrect. You had asked actually earlier to your planning staff, what's going on there, what is it?
Yeah.
It is a different type of panel. So the panels that have cadmium are called thin film panels. We are not proposing thin film panels. We are proposing monocrystalline panels, which do not have cadmium.
And so, is that an industry change, or is
It's
that?
it's a different type of technology. So there's different types of solar technology with panels, monocrystalline, polycrystalline, thin film. We're using monocrystalline. The panels that do have cadmium are thin film. We are not proposing
So,
using them.
in the monocrystal, what is in those panels? Why would you choose one over the other? What, the cadmium, I mean,
There's no cadmium, so in it, it's really glass, polymer, aluminum, copper, and semiconductor materials.
and are any of those, I mean, if a panel breaks or anything, does that end up on the surface, the ground? How does that?
Chris Corrado, who's our, 35 years expert of environmental,
Yeah,
can speak to
so-
it a little further than I can.
You know, the decision on the panels, you know, technology changes, we're using the latest technology. You know, older technologies I can't really speak to, but, you know, as a standard business practice, we monitor all the panels. If we see a fluctuation in a panel, we will send somebody to take a look at it. If it's a maintenance, if it's broken, we're gonna replace it, we're gonna collect it, and we're gonna recycle it.
But I guess go ahead,
It
Jen.
says the current proposed solar panels do not contain cadmium, nor do they contain lead above regulatory protocol that would render them a hazardous waste.
Correct, so technically, we could put them in a landfill, but we don't, we recycle.
I guess my question is, what I'm asking, is there anything in the panels that would be hazardous to the soil if it were to leach into the soil?
So-
Let's say we had a
so it's
huge hailstorm, and it broke, half your panels and whatever came out onto the ground, right?
So the first thing that's gonna happen is it's gonna hit the top, which is a glass, and it sandwiches the conductor material, and then there's a polymer. So if anything shatters the glass and breaks the panel and the glass falls, we're gonna collect everything on the ground. There's no liquid in it, there's no hazardous materials that are gonna fly out. I mentioned in this, the what's called TCLP, the Toxic Characteristic Leachate Protocol. That's what the EPA uses to determine if there's anything, to deem something a hazardous waste. In these panels, there's no lead, there's no cadmium at those levels. So technically, they're pretty much just a standard waste. They're not regulated. But as a company, we're replacing them, we're gonna take them, and we're gonna recycle them, because there's value in the panel and value in recycling. We're not gonna leave it sitting on the ground long enough for it to weather or anything like that. You made reference to businesses, right? National Grid has 17,000 workers in the United States. NextEra, which is a part of, owns Florida Power and Light, has, I don't know how many thousand.
Over 14,000.
I mean, we're not a rooftop solar company that's gonna be here for 4 years and then leave. So, on all our facilities, whether electric generating facilities, solar, we have battery storage with NextEra on the island. We wanna maintain these in good working condition. We wanna make sure that all the equipment is functioning properly. If it's not, we swap it out. Waste management is a big part of what my group does, as well as licensing and permitting and air and water quality, things like that. you know, we have contracts with Veolia and all the big companies, you know, they recycle this stuff. They can get 97% of the materials out of these panels to recycle these days.
So, I just wanna go back, so for the hazardous waste in a particular panel is rated by who?
So, in the United States, there's no regulations right now on solar panels. So you go to what's called Resource Recovery Act, RCRA Act. Under RCRA, the generator has to determine if anything in their waste, and nothing is waste until you deem it waste, meets criteria. So you do this test on it. If it fails it, it's deemed a hazardous waste. If it's not, then it's okay. So
Yeah.
where the solar industry is going, in particular in Europe, is Europe, the European Union actually has mandated that everything gets recycled like an e-waste, like your computers and your cell phones and everything. In the United States, we haven't gotten that far yet. Washington State, on a state level, has actually said, okay, you're gonna treat it like e-waste. There is a bill in the New York State Senate right now that's passed the Senate, but not the House, hasn't been signed, that the manufacturer of the solar panel needs to take the solar panel back and deal with it as recycling. We haven't gotten quite there yet. Understand that, you know, the proliferation of solar, and these things last 20, 25 years, is we're looking out what's gonna happen in 15 or 20 years. So, you know, in the meantime, as a company, we already have solar panels, and National Grid's in upstate, we're the electric company and things. We use solar panels on some of the equipment down here. We've elected to recycle them, because it's better than, you know, trying to test them and get rid of them as hazardous waste and whatnot. So as an industry, I think you're gonna see, solar moving towards either the manufacturer or somebody commercially taking them to recycle, because as I said, there's a lot of value in recycling.
Supervisor, I just wanted to, I think maybe a quick takeaway from this, and I know you have some follow-up, but quick takeaway is, number one, even though recycling isn't imposed either federally or at least yet here, as Chris said, in New York State, this is something that we choose to do as a business model. That's what the applicant chooses to do. And I think earlier, because I could see, I think maybe you were driving at a simple question, which is there anything here that can leach into the soil? And the takeaway from this is that there isn't. You don't have that situation where that could happen. And I think that's important just from a simple baseline perspective to establish.
Well, I guess, and it goes back to, and I think this is something you said, technology is constantly changing, right? So I'm sure cadmium was the standard bearer at one point, for these solar panels, and there was issues with that. So there's, I mean, you're looking to come in and site solar here for close to 30 years, right? So what assurances do we have as a town that as technology changes, that we're aware, if you decide to swap out your panels for a different type of panels, that you're still going to meet the standards that we're expecting today? So, you know, I would like some assurance
We would
that
agree.
that is.
We would agree to that.
Okay.
If I could address that, that was an issue that was raised, when we drafted the solar code, whether or not we require building permits if a panel had to be replaced.
That's right.
And if we left it so that it's up to the chief building inspector to make that determination, if it's one or two or a couple of panels, no. If it's wholesale replacement or 50% or 25% replacement because you're changing technology, yes, we're gonna require a building permit for that, and probably at that point, we're gonna want analysis as to what the composition is. If we feel there's something potentially environmentally sensitive with it, we're gonna bring it back to the board for review.
But I don't think I think the onus should be on the applicant. So if you're coming in with a particular technology with these panels, I think there should be a notification to the town, even if you're swapping out one panel, because you can swap out one panel here, but we don't know what's going in there. I think the applicant should be required, when they switch panels to a different makeup, a different compound, whatever has changed, that there's notification to the town that, you know, we'll be swapping out panel A for panel B, and this is the difference in the compound, and give us the rating of if there's any hazardous material in it.
Yeah, so
I
let me
don't think it's a big
Let me
deal.
just address that real quick.
No, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
First, we planned the useful life of these solar panels for the whole life of the project. So we would only be swapping out if there was hail or there was small damage to the panels, and it would be on a one-by-one basis.
Or an
And we-
a change in technology.
No, we wouldn't.
No?
If there was a change in, absolutely not. If there was a change in technology in 10 years, I would not wanna swap out. We would keep the original panels we have.
And you're restricted on the megawatts.
Correct.
Correct.
We are not allowed to build over.
So even if there was a increase in
Right.
technology where you could put, where you have 80,000 panels, you could put 160,000 panels and generate 44
But
megawatts,
you
the
could-
megawatts are remaining
You
the
could
same.
put 50 panels instead of all of these panels and get the same megawatts with the minimal, maintenance in 15 years from now. I can't see you not heading that way. So, I mean, that would be common business sense. You wouldn't replace them, you'd replace them with a
But I
different
think
panel.
what
I
Mr.
would-
Murphy said, we need a building permit to do that.
Yep.
But what I'm saying is, I think that they should be required, if they change the type of panel they're putting in there from the original site plan, that they should notify the town, the change in panels, and provide us with any of the environmental information about those panels that are going into the property
Sure,
over
we
there. I
can-
don't
we-
think it's a big deal.
No,
mean,
I
you
mean,
guys
our
are fine
plan,
with
our
it,
plan
so-
is not to change it,
Yeah,
that's not.
no,
Right.
yeah,
That-
it's
that's
just a
in the
safeguard.
No, we,
Jeff,
okay.
that's in the current code, isn't it?
If it's 1 or 2 panels, we do not require a building permit.
Right, but if you're changing all of them out to a
Yeah,
different
for
type of
different
panel,
technology, that's not gonna,
Yeah.
No, we're perfectly
There's no,
fine saying
there's
that.
no
I would
issue with
think
that. No issue.
Usually what we do is replacement in kind,
Correct.
because this system is engineered.
and that's in the
So-
code.
So that's basically, if you're not
In
replacing
kind.
in kind, I think that the
Right.
town should
In
be
kind
notified.
is in the code, if you're
Right.
replacing it in kind, you don't need a permit, but if you're changing it to a different type of panel, then you have to get a building
And
permit.
if I could just say this too, I think what Chris is driving at, just so you can take some comfort from, is that because of the way the project is engineered, it's engineered for this type of panel, so you just couldn't have some wholesale change to some other technology, only because the
You have a
it's,
crystal ball 30 years from now,
Right.
and you can tell me that
Yeah.
with absolute
Right.
assurance, I would say yes.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna say 30 years in this technology is a very long time.
Well, and,
so-
I mean, who's not, I mean, you're saying that these are safe and, you know, but who's to know what might happen in the future? If somebody might determine that there's an issue with somebody, so we don't know.
but the point is,
It's easy
we,
enough to.
we agree to that.
Yes,
I
exactly.
think we're all saying the same
Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
Um,
let's keep
so the next item was, there was a lot of talk about there's no decommissioning plan, which for your solar ordinance, that's not allowed. We do have a
Right, I know.
decommissioning plan.
Well, we got that
And we
today.
also have a financial obligation in that decommissioning plan so we can't walk away and drop the keys. That's not gonna happen. We're financially assuring that the decommissioning plan will happen, so I just wanna put that out there. Also, we talked about recycling.
Just
So-
with the
Go
decommissioning
ahead.
plan, like I said, I haven't had a chance to read over this, but the agricultural mitigation for solar energy projects, have you addressed everything in there for their decommissioning, and have you reached that?
Yes,
Have
so
you complied with that?
Bill and myself will talk about that.
Okay.
So, one on that, we all know the area, the land, the western parcel is not in an ag district. It is farmland, it's not in an ag district. The guidelines right now, and Bill can speak to this a little more, really are for if you're going to be farming the land while you have solar panels. And the great majority of the items in there, we already conform with no adjustments. I don't know, Bill, if you wanna add some more detail.
Right, I mean, one of the biggest, ag markets is concerned if you build a project, on say half a property and you're still farming the other half and you're running collection lines through it, they wanna make sure you're 48 inches deep with your collection lines. Or, putting access roads at grade, so the tractor can still
makes sense.
traverse it. So a lot of them are, relevant to active agriculture, this being, conversion to solar use. There's not as many that are applicable, but the ones that are, like stripping topsoil, there is minor grading proposed on this project. When we do grading, we strip the topsoil, do the grading, replace the topsoil. When we dig a trench to put a collection line in, same thing, you strip the topsoil, excavate for your trench, and then backfill, put the topsoil on top. And then one of the biggest elements is after the useful life of the project, when you want to restore it back to agriculture, that's when, if there were any collection lines that were, or any utilities that are in the ground less than 48 inches, then those all have to be removed. So that does not.
So everything will be at 48 or below?
If it's above 48 inches, then they recommend that we remove that.
But if it's
If it's
lower-
below 48, they recommend that you leave it in place, because then there's less disturbance than digging, 5 feet into the
So my
ground.
question would be, how much is going at 48 inches, how much isn't going at 48 inches, how was the decision made, where to do it, where not to do it? And then my
Right.
other question is, the easement in the back over there, is
Mhm.
that in farm, is that,
That's
is
going
that-
right along the edge of a field.
all right, but is it farmed? Or is
Um,
it farmland or in the ag district?
I don't even think it's used for hay.
I would like to know what that is over there.
So when we decommission though, we would completely leave the property, we'd probably just take all the collection papers out.
Well, I think that's the point, is the recommendation has two different recommendations depending on where it is and what you're gonna do, and my question is one better, one better over the other? I know it tells you how to decommission, but is it better if it's down 48 inches to just leave it
I
and
think
not?
so long as you're stripping that topsoil, cause that's what you're using to grow, and then you're replacing it, then, I mean, I think the main concern about the depth is just that when
When
you're
you're
tilling
plowing
a
the field,
field,
yeah.
you're not, getting a conduit wrapped up
Well,
in
like,
equipment.
decommissioning 30 years from now, right? I don't know soil, trust me, but like, if you have to pull, if you're down 36 inches, you have to pull all of it up, and then you're
Right.
replacing the topsoil that hasn't been farmed in 30 years, as opposed to just, it's down 48 inches, you don't have to do anything, which leaves a better soil for production.
6-1, half dozen.
That's what I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
what my
I
question.
don't that topsoil's, either way, it's just gonna have
It costs
vegetation
more money
growing
to-
on it.
It costs more money to trench deeper.
Right.
And if it's not being farmed and it's not a requirement to go 48 inches, I can't imagine that you would be going 48 inches.
Right.
So is that reflect in your plan, how the profile as to what the, lines?
Our typical collection lines, we run to a minimum depth to the top of the conduit, 36 inches. Right. So so if that land was to be farmed in the future, then we'd remove it to anything, we'd remove that because it's
Yeah.
above the 48.
So could you, I would just like the question answered,
Is that in your
to
decommissioning plan?
farm the land after the decommissioning, which works better? Whether to have to go back in and to pull everything up, or if it's down 48 inches to
Well,
begin
again,
with.
because you're presuming the topsoil, I just don't see what the difference would be.
I don't either, I'm not a farmer,
Mhm.
so I don't know what is more appropriate. I would imagine that Ags and Market can answer that, right? Cause were
I would
sent
th-
to them.
I would think since Ag and Markets want you to strip anything above 48 inches, that's what their preference would be. Right, that's why they'd recommend that.
I don't know, that's what I'm asking. I don't know.
If you could just give us a profile showing that your transmission lines are going to be at 36-inch depth, that would be,
Yeah, in the
That would
in the
suffice.
construction details
Yeah,
of the site plan
The
drawings.
transmission line, but just to be clear, the transmission line is not on farmland, so only the collection between
On
the
the
two
west side.
parcels,
Okay.
which is the transmission line is not on farmland
yeah,
at all.
so if you could just indicate
Absolutely,
that
yep.
it's not greater than 36 inches and would be removed upon decommissioning. If it's not in this decommissioning plan already,
Absolutely.
which,
So another item that we've kind of spoke about at great length today already is the recycling. So as Chris said, there's value to these panels at the end of the life. So we recycle, salvage, or sell as much as we can at the end of the life. There was another item mentioned at that meeting that there would be over 1 million panels also, by the way. I just want to correct that. There's nowhere close to 1 million panels.
80,000, correct?
80,000.
So, just for clarity, recycling, so at the end of the decommissioning, or when where a panel is no longer being used, it's picked up by you, taken off-site, not remaining in the town of Riverhead, or picked up or dumped at all in the town of Riverhead. It is removed out of our town for recycling?
Recycled. If there's recycling in town of Riverhead, we'll gladly recycle it here.
No, but that was one of the concerns that somebody
no, we
raised here, that
recycle
the town of
solid. No.
Riverhead would end up with all of these
No,
solar
absolutely-
panels in the town of
absolutely not.
Riverhead to deal with, so
We're
that
not.
was,
No.
that was the question.
Absolutely.
Go to the
And a lot of that is
licensed
worth,
recycling.
a lot of that was under the pretense that these were considered toxic or hazardous. I mean, as the applicant stated, as of right, these could go into a landfill because there's no hazardous material. So I
There's nothing
mean,
that's leaching to the groundwater.
you know, recycling is advantageous to them from a business aspect, but if there's no hazardous toxic chemicals, as of right, they could be disposed of in any landfill.
But it was still a question for the community, we don't have an active landfill here, so they
Correct.
wouldn't be here.
Right. Either way, they won't be here.
so it says also in the decommissioning plan, removed materials shall be recycled and/or salvaged to a reasonable extent practical, and all waste streams shall be managed in accordance with the state's and local authorities' waste hierarchy.
Right.
Yep. So a lot of items to go through. So the next one was, which I cannot comment on, I apologize. Someone asked about the electric bill. That is handled by LIPA and PSEG-LI, and apologies, but I cannot comment on that.
That's a huge concern though of our residents, because honestly, all the stuff we're talking about is very pertinent and very important. But the bottom line question is, what is the benefit to a Riverhead resident to have you come in and put this facility in our town.
Yeah, I think there's multiple benefits,
I-
so.
I wanna hear 'em.
Yeah, one,
Me
renewable
too.
generation.
I agree with you, Tim,
Two,
that's the main question.
you know, we talked a lot about jobs, there's a lot of construction jobs. This is, and yes, they are temporary, but there's a lot of
Yeah, but
construction
that's,
jobs, yes.
companies are gonna come in, they're gonna build it, and they're gonna go, the companies already exist for that, you're not creating new jobs to do this. You're not hiring new people to maintain this over the course of the 20 years.
It is creating jobs, it's jobs that are, they're working jobs that weren't there before, I would classify that as
So could you
creating a
explain
job.
What are
what
they?
the jobs that would be created, yeah?
Of course, there's labormen, there's electrical technicians, there's high voltage technicians, there's substation design, there's multiple.
And they
All
come in
cons-
occasionally, they're-
Construction, design,
So the shovel in the ground, where you'd start hiring somebody to completion of project is how long?
shovel in the ground to completion of project.
Well, then you have maintenance,
8
so
months.
we'll have a local maintenance, electrical contractor that's responsible for, you know, whether it's weekly, monthly, whatever it happens to be. They'll have a contract with us both for, maintenance, and we'll have an emergency response contract. You mentioned before with the transformers, we have contracts with, National Grid does, because we're on the island, with multiple response contractors. If something were to spill, you know, they're on payroll also to go and take care of it.
But again, I'm asking the benefit for
And
a
then-
Riverhead
yeah,
resident.
Well,
then
sure,
another-
I think, Councilman, I think that's a real important point, I'd like to speak to that, because obviously, that's a very valid concern for you and your colleagues. And so, I think it's severalfold. Obviously, it was mentioned here, the construction jobs, because you have technical experts that work on the construction, and then you have laborers, there are electricians,
They're
there's all
already in
sorts of people.
existence, so what new benefit's gonna be for us?
No, I agree.
They're already
Well,
there, those
well-
jobs are already there.
Well, I would agree with that, but if I could, only in part though, because there could be people then who are electricians or other people who are in the town of Riverhead, and they have the skills available to do this type of work, but they may not be working at the moment, because we all know, sometimes particularly we all know, the construction market, especially within the trades, is very fluid. There are people who work and people who don't. So this would be jobs that would be brought. But I think to your point, though, there's more than that, because there are several things in addition to that. One I would point out right away is the significant revenue that comes on a long-term basis. That helps lots of people in lots of ways. If a school district, for instance, and we know here it's a very unique situation that the Riverhead School District essentially mirrors the boundaries of the town itself. So for a school district to know that there's significant revenue in the form of a pilot that can be then planned for.
But that's regardless of what business is there, it's a taxable property, whether it's pilot or whether it's a business, there's tax revenue coming from the property itself.
Well, I would-
Industrial C build-out would provide
Well, I
the
would
same
say
thing.
this, though, there are very few things that would approach this type of rateable. I think that's also a fair comment. An industrial C build-out under maybe normal circumstances might not approach the ratables that.
We don't know, because we don't have a pilot agreement, do we?
But it's gonna make up for it in jobs.
But I would
and
also
to
say there's
Tim's-
no constraints from a solar project, there's no extra burden for taxpayers.
Understood,
So you're
understood.
providing revenue
You're
without
not
taking away
requiring
any.
police services, ambulances,
Right.
such as the
So
nature, but.
it's quite significant.
And then also, I think there's the environmental impact that people today rightfully are very concerned about. You see, look, the grid on Long Island, unfortunately, relies very much on fossil fuel plants, many of which are highly, highly antiquated. Case in point, Northport and Port Jefferson in particular. These are plants that are 40, 50, 60 years old, some almost 70. They are highly polluting, but yet they have to be in existence. What's been done on a regional basis now is to provide for renewable energy sources that in part can back down the use of fossil fuel producing plants.
I think we all understand that. I think the question everybody's
Right.
saying here is that Riverhead, the town of Riverhead, is losing its industrial land to
Mhm.
site solar to
And
benefit
agricultural land.
everybody regionally. And that is a question for this board
Mhm.
to weigh weigh what that is, and that's, you know, that is why we're here, that's part of the secret process, that's part of the determination that we're really looking at it, and we hear that from our community all the time.
Right.
You know, we're citing all of this solar here, we're losing permanent jobs. I know you say, you know, I don't know how many jobs it's gonna create, but only for an 8-month period, right? And there's not even anybody on site. You know, it's being monitored off-site. If there's an issue, maybe somebody will create, you know, change a panel, and you're saying the panels aren't changed that often. You know, so we understand that this is, you know, we can all kind of agree that this is not a job generator,
And
right?
my understanding is that, well, there's no one on site, and specialists come in here and there, but I would think those are not Riverhead residents.
They're gonna be people who are already employed
Right.
as that's
Right.
their job. And you're
So
not
it's
creating
not a
jobs
job
with this.
creation
You talk about the pilot payments, you know, I gotta weigh it as a pro and con, and I'll be honest with you, the cons to me far outweigh the pros for us, for the town of Riverhead. I understand that the energy will be used somewhere, but we're giving up our land for this, we're becoming the capital of solar on Long Island. Yet there's no benefit really coming to us.
But just, that's been said a lot, that the energy is serving elsewhere, just the energy is being sold to LIPA, which LIPA disperses, whether it's locally, regionally, LIPA's
I think people wanna know
responsible for
why
that,
they
but-
don't get a direct benefit,
But I
you know?
just
Direct
wanna clear it
benefit
out
to
there,
us.
there's no, everyone has said
Right.
that multiple times now, and that's not, you know, 100% accurate.
No one sees
How
a
much-
benefit in our bills.
How many acres of solar are there in East Hampton and Southampton and Southold? You
And
know,
I- and
and these are questions our residents have, why us? Why are we getting this? We're not seeing a huge benefit from it, and that's a big concern. And it's, you know, I can't disagree with what people are saying, and it makes sense to me.
And we have to think about how much more solar are we willing to take in our town?
Well, I think that goes back to the questions that we're asking as part of secret. This is where we need to provide the information
Right.
with jobs and how much jobs doing, you know, taking away, what could potentially put there, what couldn't. You know, one of the other questions is I know that recreation, you know, it's Industrial C is one of the few areas that we do allow the large-scale recreation that's on this site. You know, and that is a loss to this town. To also that we, you know, where are we gonna cite that? You know, where could we cite that if this project moves forward? You know, where in the town can that be offset to cite that, so.
I do wanna address that real
Okay.
quick though, it's public recreation, and what I understand is that the Long Island Sports Park is not a public park, it's a privately owned enterprise for commercial disc.
But it's one of, it was
But it's
one
a
of the
source
places
of recreation for our
But
residents.
it's not public.
But it was,
Right.
it was reviewed in our original comp plan, and in that, it was determined that that was an area for recreation, to be able to put it public or private. And this
But it
happens
is-
to be
it is
this
yeah.
happens to be
Right.
private, but it's still zoned for recreation. We will be losing that. And we don't have other places necessarily to cite that within our town code at that scale, as it is in Industrial C. So it'd be something for the town that they no longer would have access to.
Well, for us,
So-
public or private, it's an area that's used for a lot of recreation.
Okay, yeah, no.
It's a pretty
I'm not-
popular area.
Yeah, no, but
Yeah,
I
you're
just wanna
not-
point out that some people are saying,
These are
well,
just things
public,
we're
private,
thinking of.
doesn't really,
Yeah.
does,
This is all-
it's
you're
something that was
considering all
zoned
this,
as
I
part of
understand.
our comprehensive plan, something that the community was looking to do, so.
And just, I don't know where, I guess this is planning board issues on the FEIS, where it states that 85.6% of all large system capacity solar fields are located outside of the town of Riverhead.
Yeah, that would be
that a
probably
correct
statewide
statement?
that they're referring to, no?
Jeff, that's your
No,
document?
it has
What is that?
Brookhaven, Islip, Smithtown, Southampton, Brookhaven, Hempstead, Babylon.
That was a result of the supplemental supplemental document, EIS, as part of the S-Power 1 document. So the information you're seeing was prepared by the applicant's environmental consultant with their narrative and,
So did this include S-Power 2 and this project?
do you have to have it?
I'm going to say it probably doesn't, because I
No,
think
'cause it was
Riverhead
done-
ends up, other
no,
than
'cause it was
Brookhaven
done-
National Lab,
This was
I
done
think
over
would
2
be the
years.
largest solar siting.
This was done prior to S-Power being
Well, then,
created.
not-
and
not-
that's
as-
why-
I'm not against,
No,
I
no,
don't think
but I'm-
anybody's
No, but I'm saying, I
we
just
have to
want for
look at the big
accuracy's
picture.
sake,
Yeah, I know.
for
For us.
accuracy's sake, I mean, I think you have to realize that
85.6% of all large system
in
capacity
Brookhaven,
are
there
located
are
outside of the town of
very,
Riverhead.
very significant
Right in the-
solar installations. You have,
85.6 of Blooming
you
is
have
solar.
the 2 installations that just went up in Shoreham alone, just in one hamlet, which are hundreds of acres.
But we have already done our share
Well, then
in
this statement contradicts
done our
this, so
share.
why didn't they pick it up on
I-
this
I-
one, as power one? Because this is part of that
all the more
document.
reason that we need a secret done.
Jeff, on this, it kind of contradicts itself, because on the bottom of it, it says, which of the 76.5 megawatts of solar facilities operated under PPAs with LIPA is 85.6 of all major solar facilities on Long Island, and all of these facilities are located in the hamlet of Calverton.
Which isn't,
So that's telling me that
it isn't
85.6
the case,
of
though.
this
It's,
is located in Calverton.
there's inconsistencies. Because it says the 31.5 megawatt in 2011 is in the town of Brookhaven.
Well, the only two solar farms in
The
this.
11.3 megawatt is in Smithtown, Southampton, and Brookhaven.
But Jody, if
The
you look
only
at the
two
number,
listed-
we only have the small ones listed here, we
Right.
don't have any of the major
Well, this was,
projects.
because this was with S Power One.
It's just a little, it's just a, it's not,
dated,
thank you.
Yeah.
and that's why I presented, I did not do an analysis of the other ones on Long Island, and if Steve has additional information that can update that, that would be helpful.
Sure.
I'm definitely curious to see what East Hampton's portion is, and Southampton, and Southold, and other towns. I mean, I just
Yeah,
feel like
that's
we're
up
getting, everything's
Yeah.
getting funneled
And,
here.
and it would also be interesting to see where the actual, you know, substations are. Because does East Hampton have a substation where the solar would be beneficial to put it in there so that there would be enough capacity to get it out, or?
As
can
part
always
of,
build
as
one.
part of SECR, I believe that that is always the question, what are the alternative sites that were considered?
Alternative sites need to be controlled or have some sort of interest by the applicant. It's not just a blanket analyze every other potential site, so it needs
I
to
understand
be-
that, but what other alternative sites, they purchased this to do this, correct? So my question is, what other sites did they review to purchase prior, in addition to this, to site the solar? And that is a very legitimate question to ask. I understand what's in the secret handbook to do that and what they have control over, but they certainly had control over where they purchased the property. So it would be, where else were they looking to site this, other than the town of Riverhead?
Why,
Or that particular parcel?
I'm sure price of land was a deciding factor.
It's not for us, this is a question for the applicant.
And what is the question?
As, what other alternative sites were considered to site this project other than here?
But the
But I think
alternative
what-
sites are what we don't have any other
That's
sites
not,
under control.
I think what Greg is saying is that's not the secret analysis. We have to follow what the secret law instructs us to do.
I understand that, but I understand what Greg's referencing there, and did you own this property prior to citing the solar here? Or were you looking at different properties where to site solar? I'm sure Nextera just didn't say, oh, I own this land, let me put solar here. No, you went looking for a piece of property to site solar, correct?
Correct, we own the
Okay.
property before we submitted our secret.
But you purchased this property with the intention of siting solar here, correct?
Correct.
Did you look at other properties?
We looked in the town of Riverhead, and this was the most substantial area because of its location
Did you
next
look
to
at
the
any-
Edwards Avenue
did you-
substation and per the LIPA RFP that noted substations.
The question is, what other sites did you consider besides this site? And it may be based on the substation, it may be based on other things, but the question is, and that is a legitimate question as part of SECR, what other alternative locations did you consider before considering
Well,
citing?
if I could just clarify, I
I'm
think.
not arguing about it,
No,
I
no,
just,
no.
it's a
No,
question,
I-
and it's a question always asked under
Sure.
SECR.
No, but I have to say this, I think it's a legitimate question from a curiosity and academic standpoint, but from a secret legal analysis, I know your town attorney can speak to this for you, and I'm sure in executive session you'll speak to him as well. It's actually not a factor that you can consider. So obviously, at the end of the day, when the secret determination is made, you'll consult with the town attorney and your experts, and they're gonna tell you by law what things you can and can't consider. And so with respect to this question which delves into curiosity, I understand
will-
why
I will
you
check
ask
with
it, but
the
it's not
attorney-
part,
I will-
it's not part of the analysis.
I'll check with
That's
the
all.
attorneys, because I think that there is alternative, but we'll check, I'll
Sure.
clarify it.
One last thing, can you have clarification on, and debunk the myth that you're having, 650 gallons of fuel oil for your inverter units?
Yeah, I'd like to clarify that, Michael.
Yeah, so that's kind of what it was discussed a little earlier, so, petroleum oil is not the correct word, it's mineral oil. As you discussed earlier, it's a level 1, it's not toxic, it's a 1 on fire,
What is the
Does
purpose of it?
mineral oil.
So dielectric
Cool-
fluid,
Cool,
in,
Is it
it's
cooling?
all inside the transformer. It's all inside the inverters, there's no tanks, there's no pipes, there's no anything like that. And it's just a piece of equipment, there's hundreds of thousands of them across Long Island. Dielectric fluid by its nature is akin to mineral oil, which you can buy in CVS. It's a very, very highly refined and clean oil. If there were a leak or a spill, we will have a contract with an emergency response contractor. We will clean it up, we will notify the DEC, and they will tell us the extent of the cleanup.
The
Generally,
issue
those
years
are-
ago was PCPs or
There's
whatever
no
that weren't them?
PCB, there's no PCB in here. As a matter of fact, most of the LIPA system, and I started with Lilco in 1990, so I managed all of that, had very few transformers with PCBs in it because we didn't buy PCB transformers. So every can you see, the silver can
They
on
even
the
say
pole.
on 'em, no PCBs,
Non-PCB,
yeah.
yeah. So every one of those you see, every LIPA substation, Tanger outlet, if you look behind the big stores and you see the big green boxes, even behind some of your strip malls, those are all transformers, and they all have mineral oil in them as a coolant.
So, Mike,
And they're sealed units.
so if it does leak, does it matter if it leaks on what the farmland that is there now, or over by where you have your trees? I don't know where you're placing it, so that's my
Well,
question.
they're all
They're all over the place?
interspersed. Well,
Okay.
the small inverters are interspersed, and it's on the thing, where the thing, it doesn't matter, we're requiring under the state, as soon as we have a spill, whether it's a few drops or the whole thing releases, first to notify the DEC, notify, I'm not sure the town has a notification requirement, Riverhead, but we go right for the DEC and Suffolk County Department of Health Services. We have 2 hours to respond to it. We'll probably contract with Miller Environmental, who's right up the road. I hope they can make it in 2 hours from Edwards Avenue.
Sure they can.
But, this is typical.
So I guess
for
the question would be, if you were to have a leak, let's just say a major leak there, what are the consequences of that leak?
Well, it's mineral oil, so it gets in the soil. The DEC would probably have us take out all the soil that shows signs of staining, signs of liquid. We take endpoint samples below that. If it's still noted, we'd remove more soil, and eventually we would have to remove and properly dispose of whatever soil there is, and then we'd have to replace the soil.
So my question then goes back to where is it being, there's smaller containers that have it, and then there's a larger storage area, is that?
No storage area.
No, okay, so it's all,
So the inverters are relatively small units, they have maybe a couple hundred gallons. When you get back to our substation that's gonna go across the way to Edwards Avenue, which has a whole bunch of these, by the way, is gonna be a bigger transformer, because everything's gonna collect into this one. So there's various size transformers, obviously would have more coolant in them.
And that'll be on the eastern.
that's what I'm
portion.
questioning, so that's the one that, so it's not over,
There'll only be a handful of inverters on
Yeah,
the
there'll
western
be some-
parcel.
right.
that's
It's
what
not
I'm
on
trying
the
to get.
farmland.
Correct.
There's a few smaller ones
The
on the farm.
inverters will be, but not the transformer that is the largest volume.
That's what I'm asking,
But it's
okay.
it's enclosed.
Yes.
Right, self-contained.
So if it was leaking, you would see that there would be staining on the green box
Well, the first thing
itself?
would probably happen is if an inverter were to be leaking or lose any kind of, capabilities, we'd probably see it on the monitoring system, we'd go out, have somebody go out and take a look at it. Second thing, if we saw staining or anything like that, obviously we'd take that whatever bank of panels that would be out of service, and then we'd have to ascertain what the problem is, but part of that would be the cleanup, and that has to be done by professionals.
So is this mineral oil considered a hazardous
No.
waste or material?
Not at all. I mean, you can buy it at CVS.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering that the larger portion, that's because then you'd be removing prime topsoil, if it was in the farming area, that's my question to that. The other question is, how often does somebody go out and will somebody be going out and do a visual on the project?
So we have O&M workers that, go out and conduct site visits, I would imagine, at least a monthly basis. I mean, probably more than that, but, making sure that grass isn't overgrowing, making sure that the project is operating correctly, making sure we're, doing the correct O&M on the inverters, on the transformers. We don't just build this thing and walk away from it. It requires constant work and touches, and we will be doing that.
Just wanna go back a minute, to the big question, we were talking about the big question about our town. I would just be curious to know from planning, how many acres are potentially developable for these facilities in our town?
I mean, we did an analysis of that, the question of potentially developable, potentially would be all of it. Realistically, economically,
All of-
there's sites, I mean.
All
Right.
of industrial
they're-
sites.
I just wondered how
correct.
much,
I mean,
how big that
they're
was.
all
All industrial
potentially
sites.
Yeah, I
developable.
know.
I mean, it's worth noting that through code revision, we did come up with a number of solar tree clearing restrictions specifically related to the build-out of
Right.
solar within the industrial areas. It's worth noting that none of those code revisions were adopted, so they're still on the books. As of right now, there are no clearing restrictions specifically to solar. Now, there are clearing restrictions within Industrial A and Industrial C. I believe Industrial A requires 15% minimum, like, open space, clearing native vegetation, and I think Industrial C is 20. So, I mean, to your question, pointed, Councilwoman, the potential build-out would be all of it.
So I guess the
But what
question
would
is how many,
What would
Yeah, I
reasonably,
just
and I mean,
didn't
who,
know how
who-
much
who is- who
acreage there is
Who
there.
establishes the question of what would be reasonably economical for a developer to come in if there was a significant amount of grading or fill that needed to be brought in or other environmental concerns? I mean, that's, the scope of the question would need to be narrowed in order to provide an accurate answer, you know?
how many acres do we have in industrial C? I think if we started with that.
That's kind of my main question.
We have it.
And the distance to substations, which has been our challenge in trying to get solar on the landfills, is that it's cost prohibitive to run those transmission lines all the way to a substation. So, you know, that has to be taken into consideration also as far as potential build out.
All right,
Well,
so
I'm
let's-
asking
so
about
I will
how
point,
the acreage
so
in
Industrial
C.
A currently comprises a total of approximately 745 acres. So Industrial A, 745. Industrial C,
This is gross
about,
acreage, not
oh, yes,
developable
this is just your
You
total
can knock,
acreage.
you can knock
regardless-
15% off of it.
regardless of whether it's developed or not, vacant, these are not taken into account. So you have approximately 1,900 acres of solar, I'm sorry, approximately 1,900 total acres of land within the Industrial A and the Industrial C zoning district.
I think also, though, just to the councilwoman's point, which is, probably would have to be a fair and probably even necessary part of any such analysis, is how much of that is realistic or even practical, because you have to factor in proximity to a substation.
Well, let's just do a rough calculation. At A and C, we have 1,900 acres. We took 745 out for industrial A, where we're not citing solar, correct? It's just
Well, no,
industrial C?
Industrial A is permitted as a special, both in.
As a special permit?
Solar is permitted by a special permit of the town board in Industrial A,
And C.
Industrial C, light industrial, and planned industrial park. Now, when you look at all of those, I mean, planned industrial, PIP has 726 acres.
But if we just take,
Light industrial has 490, so there you're about another 13. So I mean, you're,
but we're at about 965. If we just took A and C, right? If we just took
if
A
you
and
just
C.
took, no, if you just took A and C, you're at about 1,900 total acres.
Right, and if we take out 600 and something? 666?
Approximately 600, not, that's a bit, 666.
Let's take 600, we've got about 1,300 acres.
Okay,
Let's say
but-
600 roughly, so.
But of that 1,300 acres, we don't know what's already been developed and what
Correct.
those
It-
parcel
correct.
sizes are and whether or not there's development next to those smaller parcels, like, we have industrial C all
My
in
point
Polish
exact-
Town.
But that's
So,
my
It's
point.
and
not-
most of those
it's
properties are
high-level
developed.
overview.
Right.
It's a high-level overview of the total amount of acreage.
Yeah,
gross
I mean,
acreage in.
it's you're scaring me when you're saying that there could be another 1,200 potential acres of build out for solar. But you know what, we're in the process of reviewing the master plan, and if you guys wanna wipe out solar and prohibit it in our code because you feel like we have enough, we could do that.
I think-
That's a discussion
Just
the board
another
should have.
reason
Put
we
it in
need
the
to
master
do the
plan
master
update.
plan update.
Well, you could do that without doing a master plan, by the way.
But let's get back to this project, okay?
Exactly.
So I think the question is, and I think our planners have heard this, you know, the question is the impact for the town on the cumulative, not only with this project, but the cumulative of solar over there on Edwards Avenue versus the industrial jobs that would be provided if it was not a solar project.
And traffic generation.
You don't wanna go through what you said?
Sure, try to keep going. So the next item is the future expansion of the Edwards Avenue substation. So while I can't speak directly to it in the overall schemes of LIPA and PSEG-LI, I can speak to our project specifically. So the Calverton project does not require an expansion in the existing footprint. So there will be no expansion in the existing limits of the fence.
But you currently have no way to get what you're generating from solar to the substation, correct? For this project?
No, what is,
What, I'm not,
How are you getting the power generated from this project
Uh-huh.
to the substation right now?
A transmission line.
But you don't have that, you do not possess that at this point, correct?
That is not in the ground, if that's what you're asking.
No, but
obviously
you
nothing's
don't have,
been
I
built.
mean,
No,
you're
no.
going across Edwards Avenue, you have no easement to get from one side of Edwards Avenue to the other side of Edwards Avenue for this project,
So not
correctly?
for, so the road crossing for Edwards Avenue, no.
You have no,
The PSEG-LI, there will be an easement through the interconnection process with PSEG-LI.
okay, and
But
that's in place?
For crossing, no, it's
No.
it's part of the interconnection process, it's being currently developed and worked on. You asked, someone mentioned that there's no underground utility profile of Edwards Avenue, that this was provided in the latest site plan revision, just so that is there. There was also a question on Canoe Lake Avenue. So there is a paper road called Canoe Lake Avenue, it runs up in between the two parcels. We conducted a comprehensive title search with Chicago Title. I've never, in all my years, I've never seen a title search take so long. It was months and months.
It was.
So what they found,
Ridiculous.
and they actually found that it's quite common on Long Island, is that there is no property owner, and that the two property owners, which are our two parcels, have the right to use the land.
The whole land?
Right.
This was talked about in detail before we came up here about the special permit application, so again, we can highlight with that, but you guys have talked about it. So we are requesting a 20-year special permit application with the two 5-year extensions granted up front. I know you talked about it at length before we got up here, and that is the town, but we would prefer that and actually need that.
And why is that?
Our contract with LIPA will be for 30 years, so we can't be entered into a contract that we only have 20 years of visibility when there's a 30-year contract.
And that's as per LIPA's PPA requirements.
When did they change it from the 20 to 30 years? Because it wasn't always 30 years.
It's a competitive selection where they select it, so I don't think it's an actual, they pick the term.
Prior to S Power One, which I believe Chris Kent was the attorney on, right? In S Power One, so, and that was granted 30 years, correct? 25 plus 25.
To the best of my recollection, I do not believe they were granted 2-year extensions. To the best of my recollection, they were granted 20-year at the 20-year duration at the beginning of the special permit. They came in and requested 2 additional 5-year extensions, that they were required to do a supplemental EIS. The planning board, in effect, issued another positive declaration. And I mean, can't speak to their interests, but I think, for lack of a better phrase, they kind of didn't want to go through that whole process.
I'd be curious as to what their PPA says, whether it says a requirement of 20 years plus the 2 5-year extensions, and they only got the 20 years thus far. Because when we're hearing from the applicant today that they need that 20 years plus the 2 5-year extensions, if LIPA gave S Power One the benefit of just the 20 years and not seeking the 2 5-year extensions, then I think that the same thing they would have to do for this applicant.
And remember, of course, the terms are set by the utility.
No, I understand that. I was just curious when they had changed it.
The archaeological survey, so your question earlier, there's a
What's
phase.
1B?
I'll explain. So there's a phase 1A and a phase 1B, and Bill can go into a little more detail if I don't cover it sufficiently. But a phase 1A is, in essence, a desktop survey. So
Okay.
you do it via computer, you see what's being registered, you see if you're gonna have any impact to it. A phase 1B is actually you go out to the site and conduct an analysis in person and walk the site. So we've done both of those, and we've got our confirmation back, there are no further requirements needed,
So-
as we've not found anything.
Do we have the 1B? Because I thought the 1A is that this in Appendix E, or that,
So there's a couple things, that might,
it's confusing.
yeah, so that might just be the consultation. So it's
Yeah.
a process we've gone through. One, OPRHP, they've indicated, that's the state, they've indicated that there's no historic architectural resource studies required as a result of the project. So that's probably what was referred to before. The state did ask that we do a phase 1A, and that was submitted. And then that's where they asked us to do the phase 1B, so the actual field survey in the field on the western parcel only. The eastern parcel already being developed and had been studied in the past. They decided no further studies required there. Phase 1B, we went out and we did shovel test surveys, found no artifacts. So now that's just being finalized, and then that'll go to the OPRHP for the final sign-off.
So, but we haven't received the 1B then yet.
Yeah, so we'll give you that final sign-off from them, which should be within the next couple of weeks here.
Okay, all
Well,
right.
that's the State Historic Preservation Office, correct?
Correct.
They changed their name.
SHPO, PRHP, a lot of acronyms.
Well, SHPO, which is short for State Historic
Right, right.
Preservation.
Public recreation, we discussed actually just there previously. One of the comments from the public was that they questioned our environmental review. So while we did do a thorough environmental review, it's just not our environmental review. We sent consultation letters to New York State, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and the New York State's DEC Natural Heritage Program. So all of that was incorporated into our narrative and project. So it's not just our environmental, and you can see the results. You know, they've listed species, and we're doing everything we can to avoid impacts. And
So, yeah, that's a couple of the things that I had a question for, because it says, applicant does not intend to develop section of parcel. Are those on your plans? Are those delineated, the areas that you will not be developing because of this? Is it?
It's it's the wetland areas, that's where the chances for, protected species would be in the wetland areas. And mostly in between the two projects on the state's parcel on Canoe Lake. And we're not disturbing any wetland areas as a result of the project.
Are you saying there aren't any other wildlife habitats that will be disturbed?
Right, so we're only developing previously disturbed portions of each parcel. So on the eastern parcel, we're only, our project will only be sited on the old golf course and the paintball facility now. And on the western parcel, it's just the active agricultural land. So there's no existing habitat for any threatened and endangered species where we're developing.
And what did you base that on?
That's based on our studies and in consultation with the Department of Environmental Conservation. We have filed an application for them for a wetland permit, which is to fill those two artificial ponds, the man-made ponds, and for the wild scenic recreational river. So as part of their review for those two permits, they've also reviewed and determined that there's not going to be impacts to threatened endangered species. So once we finalize that permit, that would be DEC's sign-off agreeing to
And we've
that.
also done field surveys with TRC Environmental, and the DEC was out doing field surveys, so
We walked
we
the
actually
site with E
walked the property.
So,
And
so
that includes the red salamanders, you looked at that?
The tiger salamander.
So the question, the plan to avoid, minimize, mitigate any potential impacts from what's identified.
That's through siting. So we pick areas of the parcels to develop that are previously disturbed parcels and avoided the sensitive wetland areas that are, or even just, areas of trees or wooded areas that
But
could
is there,
serve as
is there a
potential
narrative of that somewhere?
It's documented in our project narrative.
Because I saw this, but I didn't see the project narrative relating back to the findings here. For the table and the summary,
Okay.
it seemed like there was a commitment to a plan, but then I didn't see any narrative to address that.
I think maybe what it is that I think it's just been well established and set forth from the very get-go, that based on the collaboration with planning staff, the only siting of the project itself within the confines of the overall parcel would be on previously disturbed and cleared land. And which then obviates the need to be concerned about those issues.
But it says the applicant does not intend to develop this section of the parcel and will commit to develop a plan to avoid, minimize, or mitigate any potential hazards. I'm just wondering, is there a narrative of that plan? That's what I'm asking.
yeah, the plan is not to develop in the areas.
Right, I mean,
Again,
So, but
Our
how are
site-
how are those
our
areas
site
then
plan-
how is those areas then
well,
identified?
they're identified on the plan
The
itself.
site- the site
The
So
plan-
so this plan contains those identified
Absolutely.
areas
And-
to do this?
And has from the
And-
get-go.
Okay, and those are delineated on there as the mitigation for this?
Well, not so much mitigation, but the plan, as I stated
Avoiding it.
previously, the plan
Yeah.
clearly identifies existing contiguous vegetated areas. The plan clearly identifies where the limits of disturbance and the limits of construction are, and it clearly identifies the 100-foot, 150-foot buffer with wetlands, clearly identifies any disturbance within these areas. So I mean, the full EAF demonstrates that they've done their homework, they've done an analysis of it, for lack of, the proof is in the pudding. This is the
Well,
plan.
that's what I'm saying. This is the one
plan
we-
that's being submitted. I mean, I'm sure the applicant could provide a piece of paper that clearly states, we will not disturb, I don't know what would satisfy the board, but the plans are clearly indicated here as to what's proposed and where it's proposed and where these habitats are.
And I
We're not-
think-
Not proposing any tree clearing, so we're not worried about any disturbance.
But yeah,
in
I
northern-
don't know that this is in the tree area.
Well, I think
In
I
the
think as
actual
my colleague
EAF,
said,
I think in
it-
the actual EAF,
yeah, I just wanted to say, I think as my colleague said, the better term is not mitigation, because mitigation suggests that there's something that has to be remedied. It's actual avoidance. This was all designed to avoid, so it's not happening from the get-go.
Right.
And to
Practically
avoid, to
designed
be
to avoid it.
consistent with the town code that says, or what was being proposed as a town code and
Correct.
has not yet been adopted.
Right, but taking into account that that might happen, the proposed code was adhered to.
Yes,
I mean, I feel like that could be addressed in a simple one-page document, that
Thank
the
you.
project
Yeah.
I mean, that,
Right,
that would
and-
not take any time to prepare,
No,
so
it's
I
just
don't think we
conforming
should-
to,
Right, and I would just add, like, your correspondence from the DEC that you included in your memo. I mean, they've been reviewing this. We filed, the application with the DEC, again, months ago. They've completed their technical review, and they have no comments on secret.
this, like I said, this is the only thing that I saw, so that's
Maybe it's
just.
just, we have to clarify.
Yeah, because otherwise in that some of them have, you know, the no impact or whatever, but that was the only one that had required a plan, so.
Okay, let's keep going. I also I do wanna reread the narrative. I think it actually might be stated in there, just what we're doing, but.
Okay, yeah, if you can find it, just
yep,
provide that,
that's not
please.
too- Another item brought up by the public was property value. So we quoted, an analysis that was done that shows that solar has had no material impact. This was quite a large analysis that was done, not by us, but by an external party, and also quoted like the external benefits that solar brings.
And I see that none of that was done in New York. So can you reference some place locally?
There's been no study in New York.
I mean, we're more intense population. This was Indiana and Minnesota.
And to think, can you build a solar farm next to my house, my value's going down, it's common sense.
Yep,
I'm
well, I would,
buying
yeah,
what
I
that
would,
study
this,
says.
this study would disagree with that, but,
Well, can we find something that's at least bases in the Northeast?
so there is no property studies. There's a lot of property surveys on wind that have taken place, that show there's no impact to winds, and what we've always said, you know, if there's no impact from a wind project, there would definitely be no impact from a solar project.
is there anything, I'm sure you can dig up something in the governor's renewable energy plan that examined whether or not it would devalue properties that are surrounded by these types of facilities, cause I'm sure that was something that was looked into in the governor's renewable energy plan.
And it would probably be
And the
worth
state
looking
senate
at
and the state
what
assembly.
an as-of-right development would do. I mean, there's few residences along Edwards Avenue that as of right with no input from the town board, no special permit, just as of right permitted zoning could be developed industrially. You know, what would the impacts to a neighboring property from having a industrial park with truck traffic, sanitary loading, noise, potential, you know, other environmental impacts versus a relatively low impact solar farm? I mean, if you wanna have one analysis done, look at both sides of the coin. Again, that could be done just as a simple site plan application,
Fair
no
enough.
special permit for the town board.
We talked a little about this, but just to talk a little more about the inverters. So someone brought up that these inverters catch fire once electricity runs through them. That's completely false. They're designed to have electricity run through them and be beneficial for the project. So they obviously contain, what we talked about is the mineral oil, but there's no combustible material on site that will allow the fire to spread. So if these things do catch fire, which is extremely rare, it's very isolated.
And as far as the vegetation underneath, you know, what do we have? We have what do we put, grass?
Right, yeah, that was one comment which will need to be reviewed by the environmental team for the applicant. I believe in the initial submission, there were some non-native grasslands. I would just recommend that the applicant review the comments from the Pine Barrens, what the requirements are for proposed grasslands, and the plan can be amended accordingly.
Remember,
You
I
know, there's
wanted-
I mean, as I said, when I, you know,
And I want wildflowers.
I mean, wildflowers, there are studies I know to, you know, when I went out to the S-Power One facility and I did a site inspection, I was just amazed, you know, there's a number of critters running around like gophers, groundhogs, don't know what they were.
Everybody be killing.
Birds were feeding throughout the site, butterflies were abundant, so I mean, you know, there could be some environmental mitigation, there could be some wildflowers that are planted to help facilitate, you know, bees, pollination. I mean, I know the bee population is currently under, you know, kind of attack from environmental factors. So that's something that could be worked into their plan and could actually provide an environmental benefit.
The only reason I brought it up is one of the other solar projects said he would have done it, but wasn't required by us.
Well, there's other factors considered too from our operational standpoint. The town here, I believe your maximum height on a solar panel is 8 feet, right? so there's not a lot of clearance below, so you're not gonna have tall, vegetation beneath. The reason we plant a seed mix like this is, it's a mix of fescue, ryegrass, it's nothing exotics or invasives. It's a low-growing, stable ground surface. So when you plant this, it's a grass, it maxes out at like 2 feet in height, if you ever let it get that high. Again, we keep it low because we don't want shading on our panels. But the main thing is you want stabilization. You don't want exposed soils, it's gonna generate, suspended solids or, sediments going into runoff. When you plant this, it grows, it's steady, and it provides good ground cover. So if you start mixing in other things like wildflowers, you're gonna exceed heights, it's gonna require a lot more maintenance, and it's not gonna have the effect of stabilization.
But they do use them in a lot of projects.
Yeah, if you take a look at the Costco site, I advise you, since you're here, if you're here for a while, take a drive up there. Obviously, they're not in bloom now. We had them do a native wildflower mix up there, and the peak was more than like 2 feet tall. Very effective.
But-
And it requires mowing, for a native wildlife flower habitat, it requires annual mowing to sustain it, which obviously you wanna do anyway, so you don't get the shadow effect. So I think the two can be very symbiotic together.
Right, I think maybe on a case-by-case basis, but again, if you're just looking for overall effective ground cover, the seed mix we propose is gonna do the best job.
And
But I
are they mitigating something, which is why we would require them to put in wildflowers? I mean, if, I would see if it was a mitigation measure, but there's gonna be buffers all around this, so if there was,
But- But I think to Greg's point, that there is a lot of wildlife there. I mean, it may not be an endangered wildlife, but it's used as a habitat there.
I think
So-
it'll provide
They're gonna
you
eat all the
shade
flowers.
very
So-
well.
Well, the eastern parcel
please-
is
please
a
do.
grass now.
Please do.
I mean, it's something we could take back for sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
that goes also to the fact of what Greg's saying, that there are, cause the whole thing's fenced, that goes to how low the fence is going to be. Are you going to the ground with the fence, or are you you're leaving?
6 inches of clearance, which is, par for the course for the other
But is
solar
it-
farms
is
we've had.
that- is that
to allow for
effective for
s-
these-
To allow for small critter access.
Okay, so 6 inches is the standard bearer for that?
That's what we've done, I know that's what Brookhaven National Lab has done, that's what we've done on all previous projects. Obviously, you don't want deer in there running around damaging the panels, which is why the fences are supposed to be 8 foot tall.
And
But I
that's how
just,
you
I would
even-
just like, to see what the standard
Well, that's what-
recommendation is for, whether it's 6 inches, 8 inches, 12 inches.
I think Greg is right about that, and I think we're proposing what the lab does, and remember, the lab backs on the state preserve, so there's very significant wildlife
And they
that goes to and fro.
wildlife habitat study, and even with their 8-foot fences, guess what they found inside the fence?
I guess the point is, I don't wanna have to guess about it. I'm asking you guys, just get some information on the standard size to leave clearance underneath the fence to be able to allow the creatures that are currently going back and forth over there to be able to continue to.
I'm just to talk, the 6 inches is the town, is the solar ordinance.
There is nothing in our code that dictates
Okay, it was just
height of
that
the fence.
it was just
That
asked.
was
Got it,
just
got it.
established as sort of a best practice to allow for critter access, and thus far it has proven to be effective.
Got
Yeah, so we should reference the fact that that's what's done at the lab.
And also probably S-Power One and STR and,
But as we know, solar panels change because they improve, and people learn things, and we learn things about solar as we go along. So we'd just like to know, if in fact the 6 inches is the standard bearer now for that, that's all.
Continuing on, there was also an item saying that we didn't adhere to the, wetland setbacks. And I just wanted to dispel that, we do, we have, I don't know, Bill, if you wanna go into a little more detail, but we've, designed the project to comply.
So what is it, it's 100 or 100, you guys are at
Yeah,
150?
There's
So
two.
DEC regulated is 100, town CAC is 150. I've said several times, the proposed disturbance is outside of the 100 feet. Any disturbance within the 150 feet is limited to the installation of fencing, trenching for underground utility connections, as well as the filling of the 2 man-made ponds which were constructed from the golf course.
Which is under the
Which-
So-
does the applicant agree, will you coordinate with any sort of draining to ensure wildlife within that area is relocated? If you see frogs or turtles?
Absolutely.
So my question is, so if the town is 150, And that's what we have. Why are we allowing anything to occur within that 150 feet if that's what the town is saying? DEC says not within 100, ours is more expensive than that at 150,
There-
so why are we permitting anything to happen in that 150
There is
feet?
no the 150-foot is a regulatory buffer that's established.
It's a jurisdictional
It's a
boundary.
jurisdictional boundary. There's no restriction as if you can't do anything. I'm the secretary for the CAC, so I handle the CAC applications. We routinely get applications for building structures within a 150-foot buffer. They are routinely approved and recommending approval by the CAC, conditioned to, maintaining stormwater, ensuring that there's not gonna be any runoff or additional disturbance within those areas. So it's not, there's nothing in our code that says you cannot develop within 150 feet of a wetland.
So what's
Just
the 150 feet, when you say the town?
From a town,
That's
from
jurisdictional.
a jurisdictional area,
Okay.
saying that any proposed disturbance.
That we
within
get
this
to review it.
You get to review it.
The CAC reviews it and issues a recommendation to the approving board, whether it's building department, planning department, or town board, as it may be.
But essentially, it's only for fencing anyway.
So that's my
And a
question,
very
so it,
small
with,
amount of
between the 100 and 150 feet, you're putting fencing?
There's a couple really
small spots. I don't wanna-
areas.
yeah,
There's
it's
the
not-
2 ponds, there's like one section of fence by those ponds that'll be on the perimeter, and then where our, Gentai goes between the 2 parcels, where we're going up to the north and then doing a horizontal direct drill, underneath the forested area, that's, we nipped the 150, in that area with the trench.
It's also important just to recall again, though, that the ponds, as they're called, these weren't natural or pre-existing, they were man-made ponds.
Like they have a black
Liner.
liner.
They have a liner,
Right.
yeah.
They wanna make Tim have a good time. There you go.
We'll try to get golf balls.
Did you guys say you own the property already?
We don't, we have an option.
Gotcha.
I'm gonna come back to farmland right after this one, but I think that was a good segue into stormwater management, which I'm gonna let Bill cover. I'll just give a little background that, I think our stormwater management plan is above and beyond what I've seen elsewhere, and that's really because we are required that all the solar panels be impervious. So we have a very, very, over-designed stormwater management plan that I'll let Bill talk to more.
The stormwater management measures are designed as if the panels were impervious. So you still have infiltration going in between the rows, but, it's designed in accordance with the DEC, stormwater manual, and we're gonna qualify for the state, general permit for stormwater activities, so. And, we're maintaining existing drainage patterns, and that was one of the biggest, it was brought up before, the board was asking, like, what is the wild scenic recreational river, what does that constitute, that review? So the biggest, thing, the Peconic River there, that's, stretched, that's south of our project, is, labeled as recreational river. And so really, when the state does their review, they wanna make sure that you're not altering drainage patterns to the river, or any way, impacting wetlands in that area. So that's the primary focus, to make sure your design, your stormwater, that existing drainage, is maintained.
But which part of the property actually falls into it? What percentage?
It's hard to, it's not like a straight line, I can't say
I
like
never
a
is,
500
but yeah.
So it's, I'd say like the bottom half of both the parcels.
On the, just trying to look where Greg's thing is.
But in the SWIP, all runoff
yeah.
has to be self-contained based on
Correct.
the impervious surface.
Yeah,
So
it's all
I'd like to
designed
address
manual.
actually something from the special town board meeting last week, from the full EAF and through the secret document. When we're preparing the full, the part 2 and the part 3, we're preparing it on behalf of the lead agency. Ultimately, the lead agency really makes the, you're signing off on it. The question specifically was impact on land. Does the proposed action involve construction on or physical alteration of the land or surface of the proposed site? Simple answer to the question is yes. When they go through a number of the criteria where it's measured to no or small impact may occur, or moderate to large impact may occur. Now, this may be an error, the board may disagree. I said it was a moderate to large impact simply on the size of the project. You're talking about approximately 197 acres, give or take maybe 150, 160 of disturbance. Now, I had mentioned, when we filled out the part 3, I had brought up the fact that because of the amount of disturbance, it will require a stormwater pollution prevention plan as administered by the DEC and required by code. Now, there is something in the hemp, because there was a comment from the public that said you can't use a regulatory measure as mitigation. So this, and I spoke briefly about it with the town attorney. I think he'll probably fill you in, because it's an interesting conundrum. Now, secret handbook says, can regulatory permitting conditions and normal administrative procedures, such as a town engineer reviewing construction plans, be considered mitigation? The secret handbook says no. Short answer, no. Now, the question is, if you can't use a control measure, I mean, maybe the simple answer to the question is that no, there will be no or small impact because they're administering a SWIP. It's just sort of an interesting conundrum. You're saying you can't use regulatory measures as mitigation, but how else would you mitigate this if there were no control measures? So I think maybe the more accurate representation to that question, the part two should be amended to say that there will be no or small impact because it will be regulated. And I think that's just the simple way to get it.
But you're considering all of it impervious surface, so I agree with you that I don't think if it's all considered impervious surface on the size of the project, that you could really say that it has no impact. So, but just that being said, you know, what is, as far as the property, is there excavation on the property? Is there moving of earth on the property? What is that? What is being done?
So there's actually 6 or 7 drawings in that package there that shows in detail the erosion control plan, shows the swales we're putting in, shows the grading plan where everything's going, and what we're doing to collect the storm water that comes off so nothing comes off the property. So while we do need a SWIP, I mean, that is a good visual in that package of what we're pretty much doing.
And again, it will just ensure that there's no discharge of stormwater onto neighboring properties, and it will ensure that there's no sedimentation into neighboring wetland areas. That's the meat and potatoes of what a stormwater pollution prevention plan is and what it's designed to prevent. So it's not mitigation, it's prevention. I don't know.
So,
And
my
it's not actually even effective on farmland. So when the farm is stripped or harvested and it's just soil, the erosion from that soil and the silt, the impact that has on the river or the surrounding wetlands is much more significant than a project that's being proposed where a SWIP is being developed.
So my question is, the pond that's being removed, is there runoff that goes into there at this point now, or no?
No, I mean, it's just, there could be, it's pretty level on that.
I'm just curious,
It wasn't
is-
designed as a stormwater
It's
management
like in the
measure.
middle of the fairway.
It's just a decorative structure.
collector, that's all it is. As you stated, it's not part of any sort of natural water course. It wasn't designed as a stormwater management system. It was a water hazard for a golf course.
And it's
It was
lined.
designed for aesthetic purposes and.
Done very well.
So on the property itself, what is being what is the extent of the regrading? That's what I was having a hard time trying to figure out. What is being regraded, and how, and where is it being
I mean,
regraded?
there's a significant amount throughout the entire property. I mean, I'm not an engineer. I mean, I could look at these drawings. I mean, you could see where the contours are gonna be reformed to. I mean, there will be grading throughout the property.
I
it's
think
fair to
most of
say.
it is on the golf course, because they graded it
It's
for a
really,
golf course.
Yeah, I
it's really
mean,
grading it back to
the farm
originally what
parcel is
before the golf
relatively
course
flat.
went in.
Right. You have to remember, the golf course is not the natural shape and
Right, it was
contour of
created
the
to be
land
that
as it
way.
existed. It was artificially created.
I understand
Yeah,
that,
those
so.
are not prime ag soils either, because they've been,
Correct.
Because what was the-
nitrogen loading and everything else.
Right.
There was a question on regrading in here, or contour. Was there or was there not?
Yeah, I mean, that's question one. Will there be,
Okay.
will it involve disturbance? And again,
Okay.
the simple answer is yes.
Yes,
I mean,
okay.
they could-
I just wanted-
I'm
okay.
sure the applicant could quantify the amount, but I mean, again, it's.
I think on the erosion
I think
and
it is,
grading plan,
yeah.
everything's.
It's all in
there.
there.
It is
Yes.
detailed in there.
But that's another good point too, is that from an environmental perspective, what was put into the soil over the years of the course of operating a golf course. you
And
know,
a sod farm.
So my
right?
other,
That's all going to
as far as your
not
storm,
exist any further.
your stormwater management, we know that the storms that we've been getting, a lot of times, how many inches of rain for your stormwater plan? Are you on 100, what is it that you're accommodating at this site? Because we know in 30 years, it's not going to necessarily be where we are at this particular day. So have you compensated for larger storms, more rain? We know we're getting 3-inch rains now, where we get overwhelmed, in the town itself. So my question is, how are you addressing those factors?
Right, well, for one, it's designed in accordance with the DEC requirements, so I think that's the 2-inch, rainstorm.
Yes, singular.
Right, single storm event, and then in addition, there'll be an improvement, so we have existing ag on the western parcel that, a lot of the year is of exposed soil. we're gonna now have a nice grass meadow surface there, same on the eastern parcel, so you could actually see a reduction there. And then, to be more conservative on top of that, we're assuming that there is gonna be no infiltration between the arrays. And so just the stormwater design has been accounted for, to provide more management for stormwater than will actually be necessary. So I think for those three factors that.
It's conservative.
Right, it's a very conservative design.
Yeah, we can keep
Yeah.
moving.
You ready?
Another item was health concern. So National Grid and NextEra both have multiple solar projects. And I think we can say with absolute certainty there are no health concerns from solar projects. They've been there's solar projects that have been around for years and years, and there's been no proven health effects from solar.
There have been no studies, that's just based on former projects?
Yeah, no, there are none. There are, from in existence, there's been no health effects from solar. I believe there are actually some studies to prove that.
The one other question that somebody had brought up was noise. Did the panels themselves emanate noise, or is it?
So we submitted a noise study.
I saw that.
It's really the inverters and the transformer. They're very low emitting noise resources. They're actually, and another thing, they're not on the property lines, right? They're actually dispersed throughout the project. But we were able to adhere to all the town code noise ordinance.
So but you can understand if you have a house and you have a house close and you have, even if it doesn't rise to the level of going beyond the town code, a constant hum could be incredibly disturbing. So my question is, and as I said, I haven't gone through the plans completely, but how close are to whatever will be emitting noise to the potential residential zones that are there? And what kind of noise does that produce? And, is there some other way that you could take whatever is making the noise and move them further away so that there isn't a disturbance to the?
When we designed the project, we actually did that. We made sure to locate all the inverters and transformers away from any residential areas because of just exactly what you just said. So not only are we below the levels, we're well below the levels. It's also worth noting that the inverters and transformer really only make noise when there's electricity running through them.
And how often
and
is
that's
that?
during when the sun's shining. Right,
Okay,
during-
so all day?
Well,
Just
when the sun.
When the sun shines.
On a sunny day, how about all summer?
But
How's
what we're
that?
saying
When you're in
is
your backyard?
At night, when the ambient noise levels go down, then the inverters are not running, so you don't have
What is the
that noise.
closest distance to the nearest residence, if you could find that out?
From property line to panel.
No, from the panel to the nearest resident.
From panel,
Residence.
yes.
From something that would admit, what's
Residents, I don't know.
25
off the top- I don't know off the top of my head, but I can get it.
No,
No,
I'm
but
just
I
saying-
think she's asking for something that would, not necessarily
Something
just
that
the
would
panel,
generate the
something that
noise
would
that's less
generate
than
the
the
noise.
65 decibels that's permitted in the
That's not
zoning.
Are you asking about something that makes noise or the physical?
I'm
Oh,
talking
much,
about
much
the thing that
further.
makes noise.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
what he's saying, much further.
Much further back. I don't know off the top of my head.
Could you get us
We
that
can-
information?
I mean, it's on
Keep in
there.
mind, when we do the noise study, we meet the property line, residential property line standard, but we also don't factor in the buffers we're putting in and the trees and everything else.
But you can understand why it's a question of concern, so we're looking for an
is it
answer.
500 feet?
That's
Is
why
it
we
1,000 feet? Is it?
sure adheres and is below what's required.
I know, but like, we can't say how far, where something that's generating, how many feet it is to the nearest property line, right now, we don't.
Yeah,
I think
don't
we're
know.
trying to
We
look
can
right
do it.
now,
Okay.
actually.
And we can't say it's.
Before we get it,
I'll tell you in a second.
there's
Yeah.
a
Property line?
colored
Something that would make
illustration
noise,
in
not just
there.
the panel.
Stick it up here.
Yeah.
That's a really,
So
that's
there-
it, that's it.
this is probably the most
First we'll
accurate
find a
representation and the best visual representation. There is a colored diagram here which demonstrates where the inverters are. This is
Figure
where-
one of,
Yeah, this is in Appendix D. Right. The last, one of the last pages. So it demonstrates where the
There you go.
inverters are, where the step-up transformer is, and a radius of the sound range. So I mean, the blue, as you can see, is 40 to 45 decibels.
So what's 16 then? What's that building there in 16?
Well, 16, so look at the blue, look at the radius of where the step-up transformer is. That blue area
Mhm.
is 40 to 45 decibels, which I think it demonstrates what that would be equivalent to, so, let me just.
Well, the code says 65 decibels, correct?
I mean, so.
But there's something to be
40
said if you're
40 to
planning
40
this for a
Right.
low-level
Well,
noise
so
all day long.
If I could finish,
Yeah.
40 to 45 decibels, it's what it's projected to be at within that blue radius. 40 to 45 decibels, when they measure what the sound levels are, that's considered quiet rural residential activity, quiet rural residential area with no activity as 45 decibels. I mean, without scaling that project, That's number 16 is probably several hundred feet away.
I think
So
you,
if that,
the
if that's 40, if that's 40,
600
that's
feet is what he's
600
saying.
feet away.
Alright, so, yeah, so if that's 600
just-
feet,
I'm looking at this,
Yep,
right?
yes.
So this here is on that building, correct?
That's not a residential building.
That's what I'm asking, what is that?
It's a commercial use, I don't know.
So it is, it's,
Right.
but it's, so it's,
Yeah,
people are there, correct?
right, I mean.
Okay, that's what I'm asking, so people are there,
Right.
and they are within a sound being created by your project?
20 decibels below what's required.
But it's a sound that does not exist now, that's being created by your project, that does not exist right now, that's what I'm asking.
That
Which is
adheres- that ad-
non-residential, yes.
It's commercial though, and they're
Yeah.
there during the day, which
No
is when the
commercial
sound will be generated.
So keep-
I'm
keep
asking
it-
questions, I'm not arguing
Okay,
here,
let
I'm
me
trying
just-
to
just keep in
figure out
mind-
what this is.
Just keep in mind that the ambient noise there now in that commercial road and everything is probably 50 or 55. You can't add 45 to that, it's logarithmic, so you're probably raising the decibels by maybe 2 or 3, which is probably inaudible to most people.
But, my question is the difference between, a truck going by at 55 or.
It's like 70 or 80.
All right,
That's
let's
much
say a
louder.
truck going by at 70, okay, it passes, it's gone.
Yeah.
Right? The question is, this would be continuous all day, the noise, correct?
Except he's saying two things. Number one, for all intents and purposes, as per the study and as for what we know with the technology and the science instructs us, it would be inaudible. And number two, remember, it's a commercial facility,
Well,
so the
it's-
people are indoors.
But inaudible would mean that, what?
So
That
this
it
is
doesn't
the-
exist?
This is the woodworking shop and the cabinet making shop, correct?
Residential activity.
Yeah.
This is over 600 feet away from something that's commensurate with quiet rural activity.
My-
It's over 600 feet away. I mean,
My,
how can
my
we even
question,
say-
my question is, does it need to be cited there, or can it be moved back a bit so that it doesn't interfere at all?
No.
That has to
There-
be cited.
I don't see that there's any negative impact. I don't see that there's any way.
And I
we
think
could
it's a
stretch
woodworking
the
shop,
convention
too.
to
It
say
is.
sound
It is,
impact
it's a
from-
cabinet.
It's right
Yeah.
next to a,
So I
right
think,
next to the
I
railroad
think,
tracks.
I think they're
It's right
hearing
next to
lots of
everything.
power saws
How
and
can you
things
say that it's
as they're
600 feet
working
away?
indoors every day to begin with.
There are, and especially towards the back of the building.
Well, let's
closer to
say,
where
let's
the
say they
transfer
change it to a daycare.
It's
Well,
still-
that's
it's
a
I'm
still-
just,
permitted use
I'm
in
just,
the
I'm
zoning.
just
man, not by
questioning,
railroads.
and this goes
Yeah.
back
If
to,
you stand- I would
I'm
just
just
invite
saying,
you to
this goes
stand
back to secret. This is identified as a noise created that isn't currently there. The question is, can it be moved? That's what I'm asking.
It can't, nor would it be, nor should it be. Again, it's 600 feet, and it's 600 feet now.
It's
and
600
that's
feet from where?
600 feet from something that complies with the code by more than 20 decibels. So I
But,
mean,
but, but my question is, and I don't think it's an unreasonable question, what are the reasons that you couldn't move it so that it doesn't interfere at all? That's my question.
I think
But you're
answered-
presupposing interference, and it
I'm
doesn't.
not presupposing anything, I'm
I-
looking at your study that's telling me that there's a sound created here, and then the generation from that sound goes out, right? We know when you create a sound, it echoes out. It echoes out this sound. It's going to be a continuous sound that echoes
But those
pretty much
people
as.
w-
Perceptible beyond
But
what the
those people
traffic
wouldn't
or
hear it.
existing
All I'm just
use.
asking,
Can I-
thank you.
I think Michael answered it. When we designed it, we moved the equipment that made noise as far away from the receptors as we could. So we've already done that. We're 20 below the property
I
line
mean,
standards in
listen to the
commercial.
description. Quiet, rural, residential area with no activity. If you're gonna go stand out in the middle of a farm field, in a quiet farm field, that's what it's commensurate with. So there is no impact. And aside from that, it's over 600 feet away from the buffer area where there is no impact, so it's even less of an impact.
And I think that's the answer to the question.
Yeah.
We've already taken into account to get as far away as possible. We got 600 feet away. I'm not sure that we could get 700.
How are you getting 600 feet? That's from the red
From a
dot,
res-
is that,
From a residence, from a residence.
but not from commercial? Okay, so
Well,
that's
we-
my, I'm not talking about residential, I'm talking about the here, I'll show you. This is this one here.
I understand.
You know where I'm looking at, number 16, that parcel down here, right, that falls within the zone here?
Yeah.
That's my question.
Well, this
Why
piece-
wasn't this moved over a little
Well,
bit so
because
it
it's
didn't
going
reach there?
across the
Little,
street this
little
way.
over 500
that-
feet from the little over 500 feet from where the step-up transformer is. So from the
Yeah.
buffer boundary of the 40 decibels, again, the quiet rural residential area with no activity, it's approximately, using a rough scale, maybe 350 or 400 feet
Yeah.
away from something that is a quiet rural area with no activity.
You have to remember too, if I may, this here is a machine shop,
Mhm.
and then further, right here, you have a railroad.
Right, but my point is intermittent sound versus continual sound. That's my question.
But as they're
Because-
saying, it would be
The
imperceptible.
CNI sound is 60, 65?
It's 65, I mean,
So
I
if you
don't
eliminate,
know how much
just
further we
eliminate
can
the blue and
explain
it's
this.
gone, right? There is no, it's
No, I
within
mean, it's
all
below the
requirements.
background that's there now. At
Yeah.
45,
rural area with no
I guess that's a good way to say it.
It's below the background that's
below-
there
it's
now.
below
Once
background
again,
noise.
It's not additive. You can't add 45, let's say the background is 60, you don't add 45 to 60 and say it's 100 decibels. You're probably gaining 1 or 2 decibels. And according to the secret handbook, if you wanna go that way and you wanna go to the DEC noise study, they say anything under 6 decibel increase, is imperceptible. So if you're talking about a 1 or 2 or 3, dB increase, human ear's
So
not
this
gonna
is
pick it up.
constantly over 40 here to begin with?
Well,
When the sun is shining.
so.
No, but I mean, you're saying an increase of what's normally
If you
there,
go-
so you're
if
saying
you
it's more
go-
than that.
If you go and look at normal rural background, you said it was 45. This is next to 2 major roads, it's got the machine shop. I would
Railroad.
venture to get, well, it's sort of intermittent. I would venture to guess it's 55 or 60 dB, which is not loud. So if you were to add so if it was 50 to 55 and your code is probably around 70, for commercial property, if you were to add a couple of decibels to that, the human ear is not gonna pick it up, especially if it's a machine shop and the railroad is there and there's traffic going up and down the road.
Like we spent,
It's a science of noise, it's
2
not.
trains a day.
Yeah.
My concern is really
it's
the,
cabinet
not the,
shop.
the constant of it. That's my concern, is the constant
But
of
you're
it.
not gonna hear it's not a lawnmower. At that distance, it's 45 dB. If you just be quiet for a second, we're probably in 45 dB here.
That noise right now.
Okay,
You know, 45 dB is just white noise.
And if you add wind noise to that through vegetation,
Right.
it wipes it out.
Right, and we say 45, we don't factor out vegetation, we don't factor out the
Furry
fence that
animals
might
running
have
around?
the thing. Well, we
so
have,
this will have vegetation
And birds.
buffer here?
well, there may be vegetation there now, or it's not.
Right, existing.
Could I also just point out one thing too, because I think, actually, it ties into what the councilwoman said earlier when she was talking about this being a closer to 2-year process. Remember, as we referenced, there were pre-meetings that predated, pre-application meetings that predated the application being made approximately 15 months ago. That pushed this back actually closer to a 2-year process, and these were the type of things that were discussed. Now, these are type of things that affirmatively I know that the applicant always looks to take upon itself to cite in this way, but I will tell you, in those pre-application meetings, your staff made special mention to have these things done and placed in this manner to mitigate the noise. So these were things that were planned from quite some time ago.
And I commend the staff for addressing all of this, but then that information needs to be imparted to us as we're going through the decision-making process, so.
I think it does say, right, the 45 decibel, it does say in the report that the 45 decibels is in the, so it's in there.
It's not an argument of how loud it is, it's an understanding, and that's what this process is about. It's coming to an understanding, being able to ask the questions, and having the questions answered. I mean, it's as simple as that.
But it's in the report, right, Greg, that 45
Correct.
decibels is the.
Correct, I mean, I'm reading from the
Yeah.
expanded EAF that the applicant has provided. I'm not a sound engineer, I don't come up with this stuff. I'm reading black and white from a document and in color that the applicant has demonstrated these noise levels.
And compliance
And
way below our code.
it's
Fully in
understood,
compliance
and I'm glad that we be able to have a discussion to clear it up. I mean, that's
Yes.
the purpose of this.
So the next one, the dielectric fluid, we talked about that actually before, so that really runs us through all these, all the items.
Well, just one more from this morning, you mentioned vegetation. We do have a landscape plan in there, it does specify what trees to be used. We took the recommendation of the planning board, what heights what heights they'll be planted at, and that's all in a landscaping plan, already submitted.
And I guess,
Just to clarify, the one concern I had was because there were members of the public which spoke about residential buffers. I just want to ensure that when I went to the S-Power site, I noticed there were some plants that would need to grow to size.
Right,
I would
and
like to ensure,
yeah, and the concept-
along those residential areas, just an assurance from the applicant, and we can detail that, the board can establish a height,
Yeah.
that we've plant, not fully mature, but somewhat mature plants that
Right.
will provide an immediate screening benefit,
Right.
as
But I
opposed to
think that
something that
just
will
the
take.
councilwoman asked that we
Correct.
provide what heights and whatnot, it's
Correct.
already been
Yeah,
provided.
17.
Right, right now we're proposing 7 to 8 feet in height, installed height, for the trees, and then also rows of shrubs to mix it up, so.
And was there, another, has there been issues as far as once the trees are planted, the maintenance of them and how they get watered and how often that they're,
With S-Power, the applicant was required to provide a landscape maintenance bond, which they did. The rough estimate for that is I believe they took the total value of the installed landscaping.
It's
They
1/3.
provided a bond of about 1/3 of that installed value in the event that there needed to be any intervention by the town for maintenance or revegetation or anything.
But it is a condition of site plan approval, and it's in our town code
our
as
town
far
code,
as site
correct.
plan conditions that they must maintain the vegetation that's being planted.
Correct.
Otherwise, they're in violation of site plan and they get a ticket from code enforcement and they have to replace it.
so a couple of the other questions I had, part of, and I keep going back to this ag one, cause I really haven't had a chance to look through all of them. But was also, somebody on site, to monitor it as the stanchions, I guess they're called, for solar that goes in, that it's monitored, by somebody in the part that's currently ag, and they do acknowledge that it's not under New York State Ag and Market Law, but regardless of this, their recommendation, was their recommendation, was to, I don't even have the first letter from them, was to adhere to this. And then part of the requirements was, let's see, with the access roads as far as that, cable, but I believe that there was also some monitoring,
What are you reading off of?
I'm reading off of what was sent by Ag and Markets as a involved agency, that they had, requested. Like I said, I read through this quickly, but I think some of it was a monitoring of the topsoil when everything was being placed there.
I think the one thing that, is to the benefit, offered by solar farmers, and this one included, if this property was developed with any other industrial use, such as a warehouse or any other type of use, we would not be having this conversation, because all the prime ag soils would be removed from the property, and the ability to farm it would be gone immediately, forever.
And irrevocably, correct.
But we would also have the benefit of jobs.
I mean, I could probably get some, we developed a 50,000 square foot, the Calverton Pods warehouse. I mean, I don't know that in the day of technological advancement and automation,
It doesn't generate, that
there
use does not
may
generate a
not
lot of
be a
jobs.
guarantee of a significant amount of jobs generated. What if it was developed with 200,000 square feet of warehousing? I mean,
But we're
to say it's commensurate, I think is a little, it's
Oh.
speculative, because we don't
It's
know.
not-
We
it's not-
started
we don't
getting a
know
lot
what
of
uses-
companies coming in, putting in warehouses, we would be asking
I
the
mean, but
same
we don't
questions.
know what the
We're asking
guaranteed
questions,
job
we're getting a lot of
creation-
the same
there is no
industry.
The number one job creation of the pods are truck drivers.
We're asking for the impact of the siting of so much solar on our industrial C property. Here, this says the project sponsor shall provide a monitoring and remediation period of no less than 365 days following the date upon which the project, achieves commercial operation. The 1-year period allows for the effects of climate cycles such as frost action, precipitation and growing seasons to occur, blah, 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 blah. The monitoring and remediation phase is used to identify any remaining agricultural impacts associated with constructions that are in need of mitigation and to implement the follow-up restoration. So I'm not really sure, if it's not currently being farmed, how that works.
So this,
But
this.
it won't be being farmed after we're done, and that's for, as Bill mentioned before, if you have a field and the solar, how does the solar impact the field?
Right, but by the same token, I'm not really sure I'm following that, because I think what Greg was saying prior was that the farm area that's currently being farmed will be available for farming with the decommissioning of the property.
No, but they're talking about to monitor it for a year to make sure you can continue to farm while the solar panels are there.
That's what I'm trying to figure out, if that's,
That's what you read.
yeah.
Alright, so after we decommission the project and everything, that's when they'd want, a year of monitoring afterwards to make sure, like it says in here, frost conditions or topsoil
Yeah.
conditions or, you know, it would be monitored following decommissioning 30 years down the road.
Like I said, I haven't had a chance to read through the whole, because it does, it varies between whether it's getting farmed, not getting farmed, what's going,
And also,
what's
just
going.
again, just
And what's
discussions,
applicable?
that's not a requirement, right? That they're stated they're not in an ag district and the board to consider, no.
But it's a recommendation by one of the
Correct.
other,
I just didn't see you said requirement.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And so all the transmission is underground on the site, is what it is? And then what gets put over that? It's just,
Dig a trench and dig a trench.
and then just put it, and then just. And then how big is in the front of the property where you're putting, what is it, the step down unit, is it a step down unit, is that what
Step
it's
up,
called?
step
Step up,
down.
step up, step down. How big is that, and what is that, and is there noise with that, and what?
So that's on the noise plan we submitted, that's the unit you were actually talking about. So the purpose of that is to step the voltage up, so the energy can be transmitted to Edwards Avenue substation.
But how big is that?
I think it's detailed on there, it's probably,
I didn't have a scale on it,
And how close to the road is that one? Does that have a buffer around it also?
within all the setbacks.
So if you go to the back and set, page sheet 317, don't recall at the top of my head the red setback here, but that's the approximate footprint right there of the.
And what is it, just one story?
Yeah.
It's equipment,
Right, there's no
it's just equipment on gravel.
habitable structures or anything like that. It's just a transformer and then the, you know, the interconnection line, which then goes underground.
maybe 60 feet.
And that gets a buffer around it?
With the landscape plan.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we did, yeah.
And do you guys, I know we had this issue with one of the other solar projects, are you anticipating having any other solar projects or citing other solar projects here?
I can tell you right now, no.
Never again.
The jet timeline to the 22.9 megawatts as proposed.
Absolutely. And just, oh, yeah, our interconnection limits, the interconnection, we were saying actually don't
Yes,
have a, yeah, absolutely,
underneath
yeah.
Edwards Avenue as we conditioned as
Yeah.
Power One.
So we can't come in and say we're doing it,
Basically,
we're
yes,
using the same
correct.
interconnection.
We don't want
for
you to
this.
just say,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah,
well,
no,
we've
it's
got
the
this
limit.
easement, so we're
Yeah.
gonna pump through.
Absolutely.
So if you'll agree to limit it to 22.9 megawatts, I think that puts that.
Agreed
issue
right
to
now.
bed.
Right, it's agreed.
Okay, cause we're gonna outzone solar. We're removing it. Next town board meeting. Public hearing.
All right, guys, anybody questions for anybody else?
I do have some,
Not of the applicant.
we went through a lot today.
Yeah, we did.
Do have some closing statements, and
Okay.
I wanna repeat something that Chris said at the very start of this, is that National Grid and NextEra have both been in business for probably combined over 100 years, maybe even more. We are in the business to do this for our customers and the stakeholders and communities. We're built our business on being good neighbors, and we wanna make sure we continue to do so. That's why we're here today, that's why we wanna continue the dialogue. We were trying to get on a November board meeting, just be full disclosure, we were trying to get on a November board meeting with LIPA, that obviously didn't happen.
Mhm.
We are really trying to get on a December board meeting with LIPA, that's on December 18th. I wanna do whatever it takes, however we can help you to make that happen. I don't know if there's a data request you need from us, or there are follow-up items, whatever you need from us, we will take care of in an expedited manner. We think we're ready to be on that. If you don't, that's, I think differs from my opinion. I think we've gone through a thorough review, and just wanna make sure that we can at least try to facilitate hitting that.
Mhm.
And I would want to add to that, which is something that's been said too. Obviously, the recommendation for the neg deck has been out there for quite some time, and always from our perspective, we've believed, and we've been told that we've done everything that we could possibly do, met with everyone with whom we were asked to meet, and revise everything that we were asked to revise. And of course, we're very happy to be here today, and I think this was a very good give and take. Having said that, these folks, for lack of a better term, and I know it's no one's intention, but the practical effect is, they've been put through the ringer, but more than that too, significant investments and plans, and then the interrelationship that they have with the utility, LIPA, PSEG, is all at risk now. So when Michael is asking for that and saying, now at this point, we need to adhere to what we best possibly can adhere to, I'd ask you to do, please, everything that you can to try to make that happen.
Well, we have to look at the big picture, and, our problem isn't with what you're doing. Our problem is, we have to look at how much solar we want in Riverhead and what are the benefits to it. And quite frankly, I feel like if we'd had the SECR review, we wouldn't have had to ask all these questions. And a precedent's already been set in our town to POSDEC this. So, that's the problem that I'm having.
Well, I think that the POSDEC situation that relates to another project.
But
That
this
was-
is
no.
this is a project, adjacent
Can I-
property,
But-
and a
Mhm.
large project.
I just wanna,
Right, but
that happened, and what we did is we detailed, we took all of the lessons learned, everything, all that time, we didn't sit idle. We went through, we prepared our documents, we took all the lessons learned from S-Power, from the planning staff, from the planning board, from the town board, and incorporated that
And the
day,
public comments.
and the public, day one, September 2018, when we submitted this, that was all included in our project.
And I think it's also very fair to say too, and I think this is actually a matter of public record, that the POSDEC with respect to S-Power was substantially, very substantially driven by the fact that the planning board, which was lead agency in that matter, was very less than pleased with what they found to be the submissions and the interaction with that applicant. And so we were specifically told, an outcome there happened because, in essence, an applicant sort of drove that to happen. But in this particular matter, that would not have to be the case, because there are many lessons that were learned from how those folks interacted with the town on that matter. Here, this has been done in an entirely different way.
And I'm just gonna go back to process, okay? It's the town board that makes a determination on seeker, whether it's POSDEC and it's NEGDEC, right? In order to be able to make that determination, we need to be provided with the information that we need to be able to make a decision. This is the first time that this board has sat down with a complete record of that information to address this issue. So while I understand your time constraints, and I respect that you would like to move this forward, it doesn't shirk the responsibilities of this town board to review this application in a manner to come up with whatever the declaration will be under SECR. We know it's a type 1, whether it's a POSDEC or NEGDEC. You being here today to answer a lot of these questions, I think was incredibly helpful, to be able for us to then sit down together, review this information. As I said, some of this information was just given to us today. But in order to be fair to our community and to be able to assess this project, which we all agree is an incredibly large project in the town of Riverhead, almost 200 acres, that we need to be able to have the time to digest this. We need to be able to have the time to look at it. I respect that you're asking the board to do that quickly. It will be up to the town board members how quickly they can review everything and feel comfortable in making their decision. So we will discuss that amongst ourselves, but we do understand that you are asking for a particular time frame.
No, I appreciate that, and the only thing I would add finally is that because of the extensive record created over the past 15 months, not to mention the pre-application period before that, and all of the back and forth then more intense over the past month or two, then culminating today with everything that's come forth and has been set forth here now, I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. In other words, because of the record that's been made and the answers given, I think you wouldn't shirk your responsibilities by being able to move
Well,
quickly.
I cannot attest for the town board members what their schedule is
Mhm.
and what time commitment they can put to this, so, you know, until we have that discussion.
Sure.
I cannot give you a formal answer.
No, I
Where we're
appreciate,
at.
I
mean,
appreciate that.
I would
And
like-
Greg, I would like you to say, so, say that the majority of the town board decides to pause deck. A pause deck is a request to study additional information. Do you feel that every single aspect of SECR has been studied on this project where any more information might be necessary to deem a positive declaration under SECR?
No, I think at this point, the applicant has submitted the information required. I also note that it is through no fault of the applicant that they submitted the information and the application was complete on August 27th, and it is now 3 months later on November 21st, and this is the first time that this is being aired. I think that is through no fault of the applicant, and I think it's frankly detrimental to their project. I
Well,
think if we had begun this conversation 3 months ago, these questions could have been asked, vetted, and answered.
I don't know
And I-
why
and I-
this
and
took
I'm
so
gonna leave it
long
at
to
that.
come to us, but, I mean,
can't
we
answer
only
that
got,
question.
we only got this information recently, so this was a lot for us to look at. I mean, we did ask a lot of questions, but, you know, I'm gonna say, we're not environmental experts. Personally, I would rather be looking at a secret on the project. And we owe it to our community, I think, before we would neg deck something, I would think we owe it to our community to have an opportunity to weigh in and not where they just find out about a meeting the night before. And this is not, this is about the process.
I'm fairly confident that there was a Riverhead Local article when this first presented before the town board at a work session on May 9th. I'm fairly confident that there was a Riverhead Local article which
Maybe the day
spoke,
before.
no, probably after, which Kurt detailed the discussion. So I'm fairly confident that this application has been on the public awareness level for some time now.
But the information wasn't all on the website for everybody to look at.
But it was
I
available.
think, I think that we
Not everybody does.
have addressed
to talk
your
about this.
concern about trying to get it looked at quickly. As I said, it's going to be up to the town board, for how long they need to take a look at the information before they can make a decision. And, you know, we will let you know, timeframe wise for that,
I appreciate that.
okay?
And we
Thank you.
appreciate you coming in today and spending so long with us.
What we're here
We
for.
do, that's what I was
I'm
hoping to happen
sorry.
earlier.
I really do appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Great time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Counselor.
Thank you for your time, sir, thank you.
Councilwoman, thank you.
I'm pretty sure those golf balls are no good anymore.
No problem with the heat in here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, we will move on to our next agenda item.
We just
Chief?
said,
Thank you for your time.
thank you.
Yeah,
What is the next agenda? I'm gonna run the ladies'
all right, monthly public safety report.
I'll only be about an hour, I guess.
Oh, well, then, sorry.
Okay, well, I'll have a wet chair then.
It's nice and warm in here.
Oh, my God, it's so hot in here.
Oh, I'm glad, my office is like an icebox. I'll go over there. Like an icebox.
Oh, Jody,
Oh, Mr. Wooten?
unrelated?
I don't think so.
Hey, where is he?
It's because originally you were gonna present last week.
Last week.
That's why.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Go ahead, looks good.
All right. Still
No
not
tra-
using the new form?
No, I am, I gave it to you.
Oh, it's
didn't
in
I?
here, okay.
I sent it over, I have a copy in case.
Oh, good.
All good, no traffic.
Thank God.
So although volume is up a little bit, crimes are probably pretty status quo, especially the, criminal incidents. Not much of an increase. I'm very happy with a lot of the decreases there. It's the petty larceny, I think that brings up the,
The number
right,
significantly.
brings it up, so.
Wait until February, I can't wait to see January's report and February's report.
Are you gonna do, desk, are you
Elbow
gonna issue
form.
desk appearance tickets right at like Tanger and stuff, so they don't have to, I mean, can they just be issued on site?
We might get to that point,
I
I
know.
don't know though,
We have an
as far as
appointment
if they
with,
have to be printed or something like that, they
Steve
might have to
Keyhouse
come down,
this
so.
afternoon.
That's the
Right.
holdup with that, if they have to be printed.
If they have to be,
Right.
if they have to be,
Right. Fingerprinted, so on a
Oh, if
misdemeanor, on a misdemeanor would be a printable offense, so. I think there's only a couple non-printable misdemeanors, traffic-wise, right? Yeah, that's the only one I can think of.
so there's no there's no,
The state's gonna go to a standard, hopefully that we'll all use, a desk appearance ticket. that
Okay.
we'll be issuing, so.
okay.
And then we're gonna give them Mets tickets and Yankee
That's it,
tickets to
right.
come to court.
Basketball tickets to,
Gift cards.
get to mine.
But could you, wanna just report off just
Sure.
quickly, you have been working with the DA's office?
Yeah, so we
To-
were, one of the first, agencies to pilot the new discovery criteria, I guess if you wanna call that. So basically, all of our arrests now, go to intake over at, Suffolk County DA's office. It's not operating 24/7 yet, but it's operating on one shift, so during that shift, all arrests paperwork go over. They're reviewed, any modifications are made by us, they'll tell us what to do, make the modification, send it back, they approve, they give an intake number, and it goes to court, so.
And has it been, time-wise, has it been
I don't think-
lengthy?
Yeah, no, there haven't been too many modifications, they're very happy with the town of Riverhead, police department, so everything's good so far.
And then the officers feel comfortable with doing it this way, or is there any issues?
Is it a
other-
big change paperwork-wise, or no? No, well, they have to give everything, so in the past, you would give the accusatory instrument, and the arrest report, and basically that would be it. Now you have to make sure that anything that was attached with that, in other words, an affidavit or something like that, that
Okay.
all has to be
Right.
put
Done right
together,
then and there.
memo book pages, anything you have on that.
Memo book pages.
Memo book pages.
Field report?
What about 911 calls, how are we addressing
Yeah,
that?
so, it's a work in progress.
Okay.
As far as I know, and as far as I've been told by the DA's office, is that we have to make it available to them. So I talked with, Tom LaValle, who's heading up the intake bureau over there, and I think we've come to an agreement that they will notify defense that it is available, and then if you need it, fill out this form or hit this email, and I'll let the police department who maintains that record know, and then we can make a copy of it, and then we can give a copy to the defense attorney and a copy to
And
the
that still
DA's
all falls in
office.
within the 15-day period?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if it's anything lengthy, then you can get an extension on it, but if it's straightforward, it should be.
You may
within
not know
15
who
days.
the defense attorney is, right?
I think up front they're gonna know right away.
Yeah.
Right, and if they don't have it, then it'll be legal aid, so.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the best way to handle it, instead of
no way they're
trying
gonna
to
be able to make
process
assignments.
every piece of digital evidence that we have, or documentation, whatever you wanna call it. They might not want it, defense might not want it, so let them come to us and say what they want, and then we can.
So we
fill
just
that
notify them
request.
that it is there and that they can request it,
Right.
and then we'll provide it with,
Right.
okay, so we're identifying that the instruments in
Right,
there.
I mean, we could cut down on the workload that way, I mean, that's our view of it, that hopefully that will reduce our workload.
Sounds like you might have to order some more reams of paper.
Yeah.
Well, how many legal aid people are they planning on appointing on the countywide for the DA's office in the immediate future? I mean, because if we're gonna be writing appearance tickets and providing discovery within 14 days, then these people who are getting the appearance tickets have to be able to get someone in legal aid to assist them within that time frame also.
I have-
So how many more people is the
I have-
county planning on hiring for
I
legal
have
aid?
no idea that end of it, no idea.
Yeah, I didn't
Their
hear, I haven't heard
problem.
anything
Right, we didn't
about
talk
that
Every
yet.
agency has their own problems with this.
Cause that's what, the district attorney for Queens for, major crime and racketeering said her biggest concern was, is that these people are gonna be working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with these appearance
Right.
tickets.
Well, that's if anybody shows up.
And I think in the past it's been a problem anyway, and now it's just gonna be more of a problem
Mhm.
for sure. Getting legal aid was a problem in the past, so.
Yeah, and nothing's gonna be pleaded out, so everything's gonna go through.
Right.
Denise is gonna give up the local and go back into law.
There you
She's
go.
gonna be a legal aid attorney. She misses
What
it.
was her name?
Oh, Nancy Carly.
Yeah,
Nancy
back in
Carly,
the day.
remember her?
Remember her?
Yeah, she was legal aid.
I'm gonna have to
Oh.
look her up.
Okay.
Wait a second, I'm gonna have to look her up.
Can I just?
I'll let you
didn't mean
know.
that.
The illegal dumping, what is that? You know?
Yeah, if it's, coming out, you know, someone's dropping off on the side of the road or
Okay.
something like that.
Okay, but not commercial, that's what I'm asking.
If it was commercial, if we found it, it would be the same thing.
That's so funny. On, Connecticut Avenue, somebody dumped all these boxes and all this garbage and litter and all these Amazon boxes and everything, but they left their address to where the box was shipped to. And when the PD came, they're like knocking on the door, hello, do you know that you dumped all your boxes here and like all your garbage
clean
with
it
your
out."
home address on it?
Chief, about a week, maybe 10 days or even a little longer, robbery with a knife attack downtown, Third Street, somewhere around there.
It's not coming to my memory, it was,
Third Street area,
I'm just
somewhere
trying
around
to,
there.
I know I have that piece of paper somewhere.
I just, all I really wanna say is it was a really good job
Yeah,
because
they,
it was
they arrested
solved
him, right? Yeah, no, they
immediately.
arrested,
They
that was with,
located the guy.
Sergeant Isgro's
The per-
squad,
Yeah, I was gonna,
Yeah.
good, that was a good job, good, glad to hear that happened.
I know they had they had a burglary too out in Wind River that they made an arrest on,
Okay.
in progress.
Very
Oh,
good.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Those are the
I'm not
cases
seeing
as
any
a
because
cop
it's
you get
November, not-
so interested in
Mm.
because it's right then and there and
Yeah, no.
you know,
No,
it's
they
not
did a good
something
job
that's
on
gonna
that.
go away.
Yep.
You made the arrest and closed the case and a big case, important cases.
That's what we like, closed by
Yeah,
arrest.
it's always a good
Yes,
feeling.
exactly.
Especially in progress ones.
Yeah.
Those are the best.
All right, any other questions?
You got the opioids is
Yeah,
0-0.
0-0.
Yeah, 0-0.
Good.
Right, so that's a good thing.
I'll take that.
Hopefully, maybe we'll be down for the year.
Any other follow-up with that opioid, with the overdose?
Right.
At the gas station, followed with an arrest.
Right,
Another
yeah,
good
no,
job.
another
Yep.
excellent job.
Yep.
They're doing great work over at the Central Task
Good.
Force.
Yep.
Good.
Mhm.
And
And
I,
that's our guy.
and
Nice,
Yeah.
nice.
I did meet with the sheriff about discharges for January. They could not provide a number, one way or the other, and they didn't have a number, so the question is, you know, where people will be going. They felt that most people would be picked up. I don't know if we want to address that at all, whether taxi service, because they do get money as far as taxi goes. So it's just something that we should be aware of, that if it
It's gonna be
becomes
an
to be an
issue.
issue, that we need to.
Line up the taxis.
I did speak to Under Sheriff
Yes,
Keyhouse about it, and he said that they were going to be arranging for transportation for those people that are being let out to go back to where they
When
were
did you
originally
speak to
from.
them?
A couple weeks ago.
I spoke to them just recently. They felt that once they are discharged from the jail, they do have some money, but as far as, providing transportation from the jail, putting them in a car and taking them back someplace, they are not arranging that.
Well, I have another meeting with Mr. Under Sheriff Keyhouse this afternoon, so I will ask him the question again.
You most
And then I
certainly
have a meeting on Friday with Monica Martinez, the Democratic State Senator, and the head of the corrections on Friday to answer some of my questions that I have regarding this and how we can be better prepared to handle it.
Just a side note, Stony Brook opened up a large center, outpatient services, Quantituck over,
Eastern Long Island
Right.
Hospital.
Yeah, that's what we need.
beautiful facility.
Be more beautiful if it's
Thank
built in
you.
a different town.
We had a question about, reports,
Yes,
accident reports.
yes, all right.
So we've, collected, I think it's around about $11,500 right now, $11,500.
For whatever reason, I don't know where it's going to or where
Yeah,
it
it's
gets.
only, actually, we just got a really big check, so only, $2,352 has been deposited.
Okay.
And I can give you that count if you need it.
This is the accident retrieval service that we had implemented last year, I think it was, whereas if insurance company comes in to get the accident report, there's now a fee on that. It's, I think they get $4, we get about $16 for each accident report. So this is what the chief is referring to. So it's an additional, I think, almost $11,000 so far this year that we've gotten, from implementing it.
And I think we predicted it'd be about 16 at year's end, and I think we'll come pretty close to
Close to
that.
it.
Good.
I don't know,
Very
we'll
good.
reach it, but probably 15,000 and change. I think.
County's charged for those for years.
Right, for years.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good.
Took us
So-
a while, but we got there.
That, and we got mortgage in default, all right,
We're doing good.
we're doing good. All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right, does anybody wanted to report on committees, downtown board committees?
Well, it's already 1:30.
No, okay,
I think
I'm
I'm
gonna read this off really quick. Okay, first and
I
second
know
to go
the
in
audience
executive
wants us to go
session,
another
personnel, matters regarding the employee investigation, matters regarding the hiring of an employee, matters regarding the grievance, contractuals, negotiation of employment contract, litigation is current litigation in the matter of John Wesley Village LLP against the assessors et al. Current litigation in the matter of Town of Riverhead versus, Greco, and current litigation in the matter of, Edward Partridge versus the planning board. First and second to go,
Motion first,
all in favor?
second, aye.
Opposed? So carried.